what was important for me was to go deeper with my faith, to go deeper with what I'm wanting God to reveal in my life. The current class I'm in right now is a Christian leadership class. I have absolutely loved it. That's what I want to go deeper with, is how can I be a more efficient leader that can engage and inspire and help change the culture in church, period.
Grace Seminary has become poised to leverage its resources for new avenues of equipping ministry leaders.
The center is located at Grace Theological Seminary and offers programs to equip and encourage church planters and ministry leaders through mentor-based cohorts, annual events, retreats, and ongoing training sessions, along with a repository of presentation topics and academic, spiritual, mental, and essential ministry programs.
what was important for me was to go deeper with my faith, to go deeper with what I'm wanting God to reveal in my life. The current class I'm in right now is a Christian leadership class. I have absolutely loved it. That's what I want to go deeper with, is how can I be a more efficient leader that can engage and inspire and help change the culture in church, period.
Grace Seminary has become poised to leverage its resources for new avenues of equipping ministry leaders.
The center is located at Grace Theological Seminary and offers programs to equip and encourage church planters and ministry leaders through mentor-based cohorts, annual events, retreats, and ongoing training sessions, along with a repository of presentation topics and academic, spiritual, mental, and essential ministry programs.
Laura Sanders, Adriana Klein, Isaac Beatty, and Christian Cardoza. They put in a lot of hours to make all of our events just superb. So thank you to our team for that. We are excited to have Tim Eldred with us today, and a blast from the past, Jeff Gill. So good to see him. Great brother and member of the seminary family. I do want to make you aware of some upcoming events. We do have a really cool summer coming up. In June 11th, we have our next Thriving Leader event, and it's going to be with Dr. Averbeck, formerly from Trinity, Old Testament scholar, and he's going to be working with us on how do you do and work with Old Testament law and modern day church. So it's going to be a fascinating study with Dr. Averbeck. In fact, I'm taking him with me to Columbus, Ohio, May 22nd, to work with some Charis churches over there for a few district meetings. So that'll be a blessing. Also, please put on your calendar June 17th. On June 17th, we are going to have our first and hopefully here on after annual preaching conference. And so we have so many camps here at our campus. We have basketball camps, soccer camps. We decided we need a preaching camp. And so it'll be a one-day event. We have 3 speakers lined up. We're going to be talking on various areas of preaching. And it'll be a wonderful time of fellowship and some food and preaching. And so that's on June 17th. One last thing before we get going. In our doctorate program here at the seminary, it is growing and exploding, and we've seen strong enrollment. And so Dr. Cardoza and the team, we got together and began to think about some things we could do with our doctorate program, along with one of our grants recently. And so we came up with the idea called pilgrimages. And so within the doctorate program is a concentration on preaching. And so we decided we want to help subsidize doctorate students around the world that would say that in one of the preaching courses, we'll go to Greece and we're going to study the life of Paul, or maybe we'll go to England. So our very first preaching trip, part of their concentration, is going to be this fall, October 26th. We're going to be taking students to Boston, and we're going to be studying the preachers of the Great Awakening and those preachers and the impact they had in our country. And so you're saying, well, what does it have to do with me? We are also going to open that trip up to pastors and ministry leaders. And so if you would like to go along, we'll have information coming shortly. You can kind of fill out a little form and put it in the box on the table. And so we want to invite pastors, if they would like to come and get the teaching and instruction and see all the locations and sites with us, we'd love to have you. So that's coming this fall, and that trip will be, I think it's October 26th. And when do we return? November 1st. So it'll be a great time. And then in April, we're going to be going to Greece, and we'll be studying the life and ministry of the Apostle Paul. Okay? Well, I am so honored today to welcome Tim Eldred. The first time he was here on campus, I was traveling or something, and I missed you. And so when I got back, my office got bombarded that I had to have Tim back. And so I am glad to be present this time. Tim Eldred has spent over 35 years in pastoral ministry and coaches pastors and churches who are ready to move beyond merely surviving. He founded the Authentic Pastor to help ministry leaders find freedom from the pressures and systems that wear them down. And as a previous pastor myself, I will say amen to all of that. Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Trent. I think first I just want to say go blue, and I thought that'd be appropriate.
Oh, maybe it wasn't a good idea having Tim.
Yeah. Good morning. It's an honor to be here, and for a conversation. When you get the only people who are worse to talk to than pastors are professors and PhDs, right? And on that level, I'm not sure who thinks they know more, right? And so don't make me lecture for 3 hours, right? I can invigorate you or infuriate you. I'll do one of the two this morning or somewhere in the middle. But I want to begin with a scripture and tell you a little bit about me, what I do, why I do it, through a story. And there's a lot of wisdom in this room. And so I hope we have some very robust, honest, transparent conversations. I want to begin with the psalmist's words out of Psalm 103:14. For he knows how we are formed. He remembers that we are dust. It is important, I think, for pastors, and probably more for pastors than anywhere. The reason I start with this verse is God doesn't forget that we're human even when we do. And quite often the people we serve also forget that pastors are people too. You ever felt that? You're not allowed to have your own problems and your own pain. You know, I always tell pastors you need to get naked in the pulpit, but you show a little skin at a time, right? Just don't do it all at once. But your people need to know that you're not perfect. There needs to be no gap between your public persona and your private life. But you know that's not true about us. I mean, I can say that because I'm talking to a room full of peers. And after 35 years, and I thought I always broke the mold, right? I used to speak at a lot of national conferences, and I burned out on that about 13 years ago and swore I'd never do that again. I walked off stage one night at this event in California. A guy looked at me and goes, "You're a Pepsi in a world of Coke, dude." And I go, "Is that a compliment?" And he goes, "No." I said, "I'm going to take that as a compliment." I had a deacon one time in my church tell me, "You're a square peg in a round hole." Thank you. I've named my podcast that now, right? Because I've always broke the rule as a pastor's kid. My dad was a church planting pastor. I lived in 18 homes by the time I was 18. And so Jordan asked me this morning, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "I still don't know," right? And when we had children, my wife said, "Our sons will live in one home for 18 years unless Jesus is driving the U-Haul." And so we did. I pastored the same church now that I planted 29 years ago. And after a church split as a youth pastor, I was collateral damage. My wife was collateral damage. So we just took some of the remnants of this church split that we moved across the country to serve. And by God's grace, I still serve there. It's not a huge church. It's a healthy church. And I want to begin with this premise that healthy pastors build healthy teams, and healthy teams build healthy churches, and healthy churches grow from the inside out organically. My email inbox, like yours, is bombarded every day with how to grow your church, how to preach better. I got this one guy who emails me now. I signed up for his stuff because I wanted to read his stuff. And then every day I think, I want to delete that, but I really like the anger that I feel when I read it, right? It's like masochism or something. I can double your church in a year. I'm like, you can't. Because all you're doing is making pastors feel like failures. When the system didn't work, the plan didn't work, the program didn't work. You go to another event like this, and someone's going to give you a silver bullet and tell you, hey, this is work. The new one now, maybe you've heard this, that if you memorize your sermon, your church will grow. And here's my response to that. Show me the data. In the last few years, you know, through education and my own work and my doctoral work on the loneliness of leadership, I used to hate research. Now I just love numbers. Because numbers don't lie. I lie about numbers. We read numbers and we dismiss them. So back in 2016, I wrote a book called Alone Sucks. It's based on Genesis 2:18. So alone sucks is a very loose translation of the Hebrew, right? It's not good to be alone. And the subtitle is God's Cure for Our Human Crises. The premise of the book is this, that almost everything else in our lives is a result of a deeper problem that God named at the very beginning. The very first revelation God gave us wasn't about sin. It actually took place before sin entered the world. When God says, before sin, it's not good. God is acknowledging something that we collectively, as humanity, have probably ignored since the beginning of creation. this revelation telling us something we didn't know. I can see this scene. I can see God and Adam sitting in the garden, drinking coffee, having a chat, sitting on a rock, overlooking everything. And Adam says, God, that sunset you made, that's amazing. That's good. He goes, I know. I know. Made it. And just the land and the animals and the stars and God, all of this that you've created for me. It's beautiful. I get it. I love it. He goes, I know, it's good. And he goes, you and I just sitting here, just the two of us enjoying it together, it's good. And he goes, Adam, I want to tell you something. This is not good. You're alone. What's alone? You are. But that's fuzzy math, God. 1 + 1 = 2. But you need someone like you, someone to walk with you, someone to carry your burden. You know, if that was not the problem, because we've got them from aloneness, we've got depression and anxiety and a lack of support and accountability and suicide and marital problems, and everything stems from, if we look at it, that's the core issue. It's alone. God said that's not good, and we've ignored it and we've masked it and we've band-aided it. It's the same thing we do with the numbers that come out about 40% of pastors wanting to leave ministry, another 40% on burnout. Less than 1 out of 7 will not make it 5 years. 1 out of 10 will retire as a pastor, but 9 others won't. 92%, they say, feel alone and isolated almost every day. Don't send me another email on how to memorize my sermon. Don't give me another plan on how to double the size of my church. How to exegete another Greek phrase. Because pastors are people too. And I'll go back to my first statement, healthy pastors build healthy teams. And so my own story looks a little bit like this. In 2020, I had hit a wall. For good reason. Because while I was pastoring, and you're going to listen to this story and go, moron, right? I started in like 1999, 2000, getting invited to go train youth pastors as a youth pastor. So my phone would ring and all of a sudden my head would get huge and my ego would be massive and I go, yeah, I can do that. And so I started doing that. I got into it to a few years, and a few years later my phone rang and the largest youth pastor event in the country, and they said, you want to do the main stage this year? Yes. Good. I said, but I'm not going to. I said, I want to do the main stage when I don't want to do the main stage. And when I feel like I can do that without my flesh getting in the way, I'll do that. So he said, the opportunity might not ever come up again. I said, there's lots of opportunity. A couple years later, he called again. He goes, hey, you want to do the main stage? I said, opportunity? He goes, bigger opportunity. I'd like you to share the stage with Tony Campolo and do a tag team sermon. Oh, I like Tony Campolo. He was a good man, regardless of what you think about him. And then I found myself traveling the world 180 days a year in an airplane, training pastors, youth workers, associate pastors, while pastoring a church, while raising kids, while trying to be a good husband, while breaking all the rules and being a square peg in a round hole and thinking I had my life in balance. And so I told the chairman of our elder committee, I said, listen, I'm gonna resign. I'd like to take a sabbatical. I'd like to come back. I'd like to work with the elders to do a 2-year transition plan. And he said, why are you resigning? I said, I feel like God wants me to do something different. He goes, I don't think you're talking to the same God that I know. He said, well, do you need a raise? I said, no, I don't need a raise. You need more staff? No, I don't need more staff. He said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a raise and more staff, and you're going to stay. And you'd have to work less hours. What? He said, we don't need you to be here. We need you to be available. He said, you're not here most of the time anyway. This church functions without you. That's why you're a great pastor. And I actually believe that. That's what we're going to talk about in the next couple hours. But in 2020, then I decided to go on a sabbatical. I'm going on this sabbatical. I'm going to go to South Carolina for a couple months. One of my sons lived down there. I've got two sons, 30 and 27, and two great, amazing daughter-in-laws and a 5-month-old grandson for the first time. We just came back from Oregon for 2 weeks hanging out with Loxley. We call him Sir Loxley because it sounds like I should have that, right? Sir Loxley. And as I'm going to South Carolina, I've got this pain that's in my ear, and it's running down my jaw, and then it's in my tongue, and then it's in my neck, and it would just hit like a truck. It put me right on the ground, like literally on the ground, where I could pull myself across this floor with my nails, just begging for some relief. Sometimes it would last for 2-3 minutes, and sometimes it would last for an hour, hour and a half. Nothing you could do about it. And we went to doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor. I started downloading medical journals and reading about this, and I couldn't find anything. I would go to a neurologist, and they said, well, it presents as this, but it's not that. And then presents as this. And so one day I'm reading, this is months later of going through this every day, and no medication takes it away. Nothing you can do take it away. Sometimes it's just, like I said, it's part of the day. Sometimes it's the whole day. And I'm not working. I can't eat. I can't sleep. There's nothing I can do. And I'm reading one day, and I read this word. I'm reading all these symptoms, and it says glossopharyngeal neuralgia. My wife came home and said, I know what I have. She goes, no, you don't. I said, she said, you've been to Cleveland Clinic, you've been to Mayo, you've been to University of Michigan, go blue. And I'm going to get that in 4 or 5 times today. And so I went to a different neurologist, and I said, could I have glossopharyngeal neuralgia? He says, I've never seen it in 35 years. He said, only 1 in 2 million people have it. He said, it's like a textbook thing, you know. It's an urban legend. I said, well, I don't think so. And so they figured out that's exactly what it is. They said, we can do one of 3 things. We can cut into your brainstem and attempt to fix it that way. We can give you gamma knife radiation and give you 6 months of radiation in 1 dose in 1 day. And you'll never be able to have an x-ray again for the rest of your life. Or we can try some really messed up medication. And so they put me on this medication, and it's got side effects. One of the side effects is depression. And I will tell you that I know why people kill themselves. Suicide is not selfish, it's survival. Because you can't stop what's going on up here, no matter how hard you try. You can't pray it away, no matter how powerful God is. My wife had to send people from our church to babysit me during the day and have the conversation, do we need to remove all the guns from the house? And so I came through that. At the same time, then, the next doctor said, I don't know what's causing his pain, but has anyone noticed that he has a 9-millimeter aneurysm in his intracranial carotid artery right in the middle of his brain? So we went to another doctor. And the doctor said, sign your advance directives, get your affairs in order, and live your life. Because there's no fixing it. I said, you can do surgery? He goes, no. I'm one of the top 3 surgeons in the country. I wouldn't let anyone touch my brain, including myself. He said, the catastrophic risk of you dying on the table is 40%. So now God and I are having a conversation. I've got no use for him. I'm mad. I'm angry. I'm going on to do something else in my life. I was already tired in ministry. I wasn't necessarily burned out, but I was. And now on top of that, I've got these massive health issues going on. And so for 6 months, I would say to God, I'm not talking to you today. And he'd go, you just did. Like, God, you got me again, right? So I gave God my plan, right? Because if you make God laugh, you give him your plans, right? Tell God your plans and make God laugh. And I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach on aloneness and authenticity for the rest of my life, and I'm not doing it in the church anymore. He said, okay. You want to think that? It's fine. But I got a question for you. What about the 20,000 pastors I just gave you the privilege to train for the last 20 years in 40 countries? You don't think they feel the exact same thing you do, even though their diagnosis is different? You've watched them, you've taught them, you've walked alongside of them. I know you love pastors. And so for the next year, we did nothing but design what we call whole care for the authentic pastor. And I want to walk you through some questions now that I've given you just a bit of background and more information than you wanted. But if we don't get this right in ministry, I don't think anything else matters. How do you teach people to live the abundant life in Christ and live life to the full in ministry if perhaps you're not living life to the full? I mean, I can present an amazing sermon on Sunday morning. I'm a fairly decent orator, not the world's best. I can hold my own against myself, right? But we're conditioned. I think in general, we're conditioned to hustle and to grind and to sacrifice ourselves. Am I off base at all with that? Am I the only one who thinks that's true about pastoral ministry? Yes? No? It's inadvertent. I'm not going to throw rocks at the church. There's enough people doing that. I'm not throwing rocks at pastors or pastoral ministry or seminaries. I'm saying, though, that inadvertently, I think that we have been sold and bought a bill of goods about what ministry looks like and what people are really looking for in ministry today. We confuse overwork with faithfulness. True? Tell me, you can stop me anytime. Because no one ever told me that killing myself for Jesus was still killing myself. No one. This is today, just in case you're wondering how long we're going to be here. It's like your sermon notes. And so I just kind of want to challenge us today. I'm not here to teach you anything. That's not my job. I'm here to challenge our thinking, to encourage you. Because when Jesus says the greatest commandment is to love your Lord, your God, with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and tags on, and your neighbor as yourself, what we don't do is read that verse in the correct order. We have to love ourselves first. Until I make myself a priority, I'm not a good husband because I have no energy. I have no time for my wife. I'm not a good father. I'm not a good pastor. You know what I am? I'm a suck-dried juice box. That's what I am. Giving and giving and giving and giving and giving and giving and giving for the name of Jesus till I've got nothing left. And we wear that like a badge of honor, and we call it burnout. So this idea of just being a super pastor, it's what I hear every day with pastors on the phone. And so what we've just called this morning is self-care is not selfish. Nothing clever, nothing new. I didn't coin it, right? What I can say about myself is this: I look like a leader, right? On the outside, I present okay. I wash up, I clean up, right? I can wear deodorant. People don't mind me looking. But on the inside, I was dying and I couldn't name it. You ever feel like that? You guys can feel free to talk. Cut me off. You ever feel like there's something just missing, but you can't put a name to it in your life? You love the Lord, you love the church, you love people, but something's still missing. Anybody want to speak to that? Am I the only one? Anyone wrestling with that now?
Seems like it's an absence of peace,
Okay.
like a contentment. Like I keep driving, I keep pushing. But when do you get the things that are running for and striving for?
Yeah, when do you get there?
Yeah.
Right?
And where is that?
I want to build on that because I think that's a great question. But at some point, have we not been told that there is a there? And so that's what we're chasing. We're chasing that number. We're chasing that attendance. We're chasing that feeling. We're chasing that high to sustain that Sunday or that camp thing or whatever it is. And even as you're seeing people get there, I got a pastor right now that you would all know his name. And when he called me to join one of our cohorts, I told him no because I didn't have room in the room for his ego. And I thought I don't have time. I don't have time for it. I know what you're going to bring to the table, and your head can't fit through the cohort door. And everyone there is going to know who you are, and so I can't tell people you're coming because they want to join the cohort now because you're there, right? He is the epitome of pastoral success. He has the book sales and the movies and the videos and the podcasts and the church and the attendance to prove it all. He's dying inside. He doesn't know how to stop. Now, he's doing amazing right now. Why? Because he hung out with me for 6 months. I'll change your life. No, because he's doing the hard work. He's doing the hard work. I love that contentment piece. It just feels like, but where's that come from? Because we know that peace, contentment, happiness, they're all from the inside out. That's why I said earliest, healthy pastors build healthy teams who build healthy churches that grow from the inside out. You know what happens from the outside in? When all the elements on the outside have weight and bearing and pressure, it's like a tree, like fruit, like vegetables. Outside elements produce rot. And quite often, the pressure that we feel is producing rot or discontentment or a lack of peace in our life because growth only comes from inside. And that's where God dwells. So when I say things and people go think I'm woo or something, I'm like, you need to go inside and go in. They're like, what? Listen, it's not New Age and it's not Eastern. The Holy Spirit lives and dwells in you. His divine power has given you everything you need to live a godly life in Christ. He's not a sky God that lives out there somewhere that we talk to millions of miles away and we can't see him. He lives and dwells in us. Go inside. That's where you're going to find your peace. That's where you're going to find your happiness. You're not going to find it by chasing anything. But the system that we've inherited, that we have to change, doesn't teach us that. And even to have this conversation in some circles, I could be tarred and feathered and ridden out. That's okay. I've been kicked out of better places than this, is what I tell people. Right? And so this idea that self-care is not selfish. What's one lie, maybe? What's one lie that you have potentially believed about self-care in ministry or in life? Anybody?
I remember there's a song, I think it's a kid's song, Joy, Jesus, Others.
Jesus and others in you. What a wonderful way to spell joy.
You're at the bottom.
You're at the bottom. You know what? I regret getting a tattoo. My 18-year-old wanted a tattoo. 10 years ago or so. And my kids went to summer camp in Branson, Missouri, at a place called Kanakuk with Dr. Joe White. And it's a great sports camp. We drove them down there every year, dropped them off for 2 weeks, which was bliss. No children for 2 weeks in the summertime. But then you had to hang out in Branson, Missouri. I was having lunch in Branson, Missouri one day with a famous comedian that some of you who are older know called Yakov Smirnov, Russian comedian. And I said, how long you been here? He goes, a few years. Do you like it? He goes, yeah, really nice. Lots of old people and their parents, So my wife and I would go down and hang out there. And the theme of the camp, if you was always to be third. So we're indoctrinating kids at camp to be third. And if you're so third, if you're the best at being third, you're fourth. And so I was so proud when my son won the I'm Fourth award, right? And so that's what my son told me. He said, Dad, I want to get a tattoo that says I'm third. So I said, well, I can figure that out in Hebrew. And then I was at the Bible Museum in Washington, D.C. before I got the tattoo, and I had the guy who was sitting there writing scrolls. I said, can you read this and tell me what it says before I put this on my body permanently, right? I had a kid one time. I sent him to Chicago. He lived with Jesus People USA and for a discipleship program. And he was a street kid. He was abused, all kinds of stuff. He came in, he's built, just absolutely ripped. And God bless him, but had the brains God gave a screwdriver. And so he come in my office one day after being there a few months, and he's wearing this white tank, right? And he walks in my office, and I go, well, Robbie, where are you? I haven't seen you in months, man. And he rips his shirt off. And what are you doing? I said, what's on your chest? And so in Chinese script, from side to side, it says, it's all these Chinese letters. It says, Jesus. Can I tell you about him? I said, what? He goes, I do that every day on the street, man. I walk down the street in Chicago and rip off my shirt, and people go, what's your tattoo? He goes, Jesus. Can I tell you about him? I'm like, first of all, the Chinese went right Jesus in 5 characters. It's not Jesus in 5. I said, I don't know what's on your chest, but man, I think you ought to go to Chinatown and figure it out before you keep tearing your shirt off, right? But that's the point, right? And so I wish, because I'm not third. I'm not third. And I know this could be worth a good table conversation. We feel like that feels biblical, doesn't it? To put yourself last. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Are we reading that in the right context? Are we ignoring a whole lot of other things to put ourselves at the very bottom? I'm not saying we lord anything over anybody. I'm just saying that if I want to be the best dad and the best husband and the best pastor and the best leader and the best friend that I can possibly be, I've got to have the strength, the energy, and the time to do it. And if I get up in the morning and I burn the candle on both ends, from daylight to dawn, well, how can I possibly be a good shepherd? If I don't put parameters and boundaries on my life, how can I be a good shepherd? I love it when people call and they go, oh, son, I need you right now. I'm like, okay, I know you think you do, but we're going to invoke the Lazarus rule here for a second. The Lazarus rule is, I'll be there in 3 days. In the meantime, I bet you can figure it out yourself. How many of you have done that with somebody and go, listen, I can't talk to you today, but I'll call you back in a couple of days. By the time you call them back, they go, oh, it worked itself out. Yeah, it always does, right? We don't have to make their urgency your emergency.
Sometimes, how do you balance the tension in your own heart of some of the anxiety pieces where it's like, what do they want to talk about? How do you keep the mind from rolling on all the things, the potential problem? Like, how do you calm yourself to be okay with 3 days?
It's a great question. I don't have a made up answer for you. I guess I've just been doing it so long. Let me back up and do another take at it, and then we'll talk about it. I want to hear what everyone else would say about that, because I'm not the only expert in the room. I might even be the expert in the room. I watched my dad. My dad's an amazing man. He loves the Lord. He's an evangelist, was a pastor. I watched him chase everybody. Chase them. Even to the point where he chased everybody and forsake his own kids. Everyone was more important. And I've told my dad this, so I'm not, I would look up in the stands on a Friday night, and I'm wondering where my dad's at. I mean, you wouldn't know it, but at 172 pounds in high school, I could bench 315 pounds, and I played nose guard on the state championship football team in 1988. I'd walk out on the field, and centers would look at me like they're going to eat me for lunch. And I'm like, I'm going to show you something here in about a second. And I just want my dad to be in the stands. But he had a Bible study. because that was important. I mean, church plant, it's only the best night for it, right? The phone would ring. Dad's got to leave dinner. Got to leave the house. Be back later. Hey, Dad, we're going fishing this morning. Something came up. Somebody's got a call. They got a need. All I've known, so my answer to this, and somebody else please weigh in, all I know is that 9 times out of 10, it's not a crisis. So what I tell people is things like this. Listen, I can give you 5 minutes right now because I'm at work. I've got appointments. I've got things to do, right? And I know ministry's people. Don't get me wrong on that. We're going to talk about that a lot in the next hour. But I'm also supposed to help people figure out things to learn themselves and not be dependent upon me. I don't do it for you. You know, that's what we do in poor parenting. We do everything for our kids. When my kids were born, I made a decision. My wife and I made a decision. We were going to raise adults. We weren't going to raise children. And so the first time they could make any decision for themselves, we're going to let them make the choice and then live with the consequence and the chaos of that choice so they could learn. We weren't going to enable, we were going to empower. So I have what I call the 51% rule, 51-yard line. I will meet you at any given day at the 50-yard line. And when you're ready and you need my help, step across the line. But until you step across the line, I know I'm wasting my breath and my time and my energy and being a poor steward of God's resources by chasing you down. So that's one part of the rule. But if they do call and say, hey, I really need help, I'll use another example. And I know I'm taking, I think this is important. I had a number of years ago, my board chairman had a son that when he was 19, he was a drug addict. He lived on the streets. He was a male prostitute and alcoholic. And so they thought they would send him to me. I thought, well, I don't know what you're thinking. They said, hey, could we fly him up for the weekend? 6 months later, he's still at my house. I sent him to Africa. I sent him to Cameroon, to one of our works over there. And I wanted them to take him to eastern Cameroon where the Baka people live because they still practice cannibalism, and I thought they might eat him. I thought it'd be great. It's out of the way, right? So one day I came home from church on a Sunday, and my car was gone. So Bradley had taken my car. So I didn't call his dad, I called his counselor in Little Rock. I said, I think Bradley stole my car, or he's joyriding. There's no such thing as joyriding. He stole your car. Call the police. I said, I don't want to have him arrested. He said, yes, you do, right? He said, and he's the one that gave me the phrase that life's about choices. Choices have consequences produce chaos. And so he gave this example. The man is biblically trained. He's actually theologically trained. He was a counselor. He said, my phone will ring. What's your name? Jordan? You guys have to sit together? Is this a rule? Okay. And Jordan, you call me at 2 o'clock in the morning. I answer my phone. You go, Tim, it's Jordan. I just wanted to call you, man. Can't do it anymore. Taking my life tonight, but I wanted to tell you I love you. Here's what my friend Gary would say. Jordan, 3 things are about to instantly happen. Number 1 has already happened. You've ticked me off. Because I was having a dream about Halle Berry and you just took me out of it. Okay, number 1. Number 2, in a couple days from now, I guarantee something else is going to happen. We're going to eat potato salad at your funeral because that's what we do around here. I'll say nice words, we'll eat potato salad. And number 3, the moment of your death, you're going to have a conversation with Jesus and he's been having some things to talk to you about for a long time. Good night. I said, that's it? He goes, yeah, roll over and went back to bed. He goes, if he's going to kill himself, he's going to kill himself. I can't stop it. And if he was really going to kill himself, he wouldn't have called me. He'd just done it. And he said, you ought to let people live in their chaos and their consequences for just a little bit. Because most situations aren't dire and deadly. So whether they needed me to be there, I can give you 5 minutes now, Jordan, or I can give you 2 hours tomorrow. I'd rather give you 2 hours, but I can't give you 2 hours today. My kids have a basketball game. I can't give you 2 hours right now because I've got another person coming in 10 minutes, and I can't put them off for this right now. So I can give you 5 minutes right now, or I can give you my best 2 hours tomorrow or Thursday. What is it? I'll do Thursday. I just gave them a choice. Jordan, you'll be fine. Let's pray about it right now. Surround yourself with people. Fill your heart with God's word. Whatever you want to tell them. But I'm giving you time to let God do some work in your life so that I don't step in to save you and remove the consequence, which was probably a choice of yours in the first place. Because most of the time, it's not what's happening to them, it is what they did to precipitate the problem. Not always true. But again, that little bit of time, I'm always better when I can sit and ruminate and figure things out for myself in the first place. Because my job's not to fix you anyway. My job's to listen. Like a good counselor. But that's how I respond to it. Anyone else respond different than that? Anyone else think I'm off base? It's okay, you can say it. I'm not the only one. You wouldn't be the only one.
Part of your question is like, you don't know what the chaos is. I don't take that, essentially call that pastor because I usually assume I've offended them. I don't know why I wouldn't.
Well, we can talk about that later.
Okay, thank you. I need to know. So I learned from a manager, if I'm going to talk to someone that's going to be challenging, like, give them a heads up what we want to talk about. So I think maybe in the situation it's made, can you tell me what you need to talk about? And schedule some time the next day. That would help my part prepare for that conversation. And then I know, because I think 99% of the times I've had those conversations, it hasn't been because I don't know. It's just my default statement thinking that goes there. So that helps me get clarity on what they need.
That's really good.
Yeah, what? Okay, that's easy to say in a group full of guys when you're not there, right? Like, and I get what you're saying because we've all lived that out. But the repercussions of overthinking are often prevalent when you do that to an individual. So can you kind of elaborate on the after effects of how to handle yourself when you tell somebody that and you look at that person and say, hey, I can't handle this right now, the email came in, whatever the case is, I can do my best, Thursday, Friday. But then how do you re-engage with your kids, like basketball game or whatever the case is, because all you're consuming is overthinking about what you just said to that individual. And now you can't even check back into that current situation that you're in because you're overthinking. Did I do right?
Well, let's qualify a couple of things. Let's qualify, and I'm just going to pull the number out of thin air, that 90% of the phone calls are not dire. So I don't lose any sleep over hanging out my kid's game. Now, if you called and said, I'm in the hospital, my mom was hit by a car, my child just ran away, okay, the Lazarus rule is out the window at the moment. But 9 times out of 10, that's not the phone call. Nine times out of 10, it's something that you did, or it's a thing you feel right now and you're overwhelmed, don't know how to think about it. So I'll give you a few minutes on the phone to go through it. But what I know is that long term, it's the tyranny of the urgent. And so I give all my time to the urgent while I'm letting the important. And sometimes the important is, I just need you to sit with it for a while. I just need you to give me a couple hours. Even if you just give me tomorrow morning. But once I qualify the situation of what's really going on, I don't really lose any sleep over it, Jordan. I think that maybe that sounds callous and lack of empathy, but it's not. I have amazing empathy. But I also have a 7th grader out there playing basketball that has a dad that I don't need him 5 years from now saying, my dad was never there. And then someone justifying, well, because you signed up for pastoral ministry. No, that's the lie. That's the lie. I'm a father first. So I want to, I'll skirt just a minute and come back to this. One thing I think we need to talk about, or at least I'll throw it out in the ether and let it just hang in the air, is the issue of calling. So I've been a pastor for 35 years, but God never called me to be a pastor. God called me to Christ. Calling, pastoral ministry is not a calling. It's a gifting. And when I get my gifting in front of my calling, then my gifting becomes my identity and my title becomes who I am. So I employ my gifting into an assignment that God gave me. But if I get this idea, this super pastor idea, this savior idea that I'm the one that can help and I'm the one that they have to call and they call me because I can fix it, that might be part of the problem. We need to back up a little bit a minute. Because while I am called to Christ and gifted as a pastor, I also was given children and a wife to raise. I have other roles to play in life. I am not pastor 24/7. People, yes, you are. That's the job. Well, then I will see you on the other side of crispy, because you're not going to make it in this game long haul, and you're not going to have the relationship with your wife and kids that you really want. Now, are there exceptions to the rule? There are, but numbers don't lie. That's why I cannot have that loop playing in my mind, Jordan, as you asked. Like, what do you do in that moment when you know you just told them I will call you in a couple days? I trust them to the Lord for a couple days.
Yeah, that's just easier said than done.
Not for me. I mean, it might be for you. And I'm not more spiritual than you, but maybe I've just practiced it long enough where I'm okay with it. Now, you deal with a lot of crisis as well, because being firefighter, police officer, pastor, you might deal with some different things than the average person does. And you get called maybe for more crisis and see more than I see. So if it's a true crisis, I'm not going to make them wait. I just want to know that it's a true crisis. Because it's not my crisis at the moment if it's not really a crisis.
Well, that might be the answer to the question. It's not, reestablishing your head is not your crisis.
Yeah.
Like, you're sitting at a basketball game and the text comes in, it's not, anymore it's not a call. You know, the notification is or whatever, your wife's sitting next to you, she looks over your shoulder and says, what happened now? And then you answer that text message, or you say, hey, like, I'm at my kid's basketball game or whatever. But then the tendency feels like to think about that and dwell on that issue instead of re-engaging in what's really.
I hear your heart. Please, Jeff.
I'm gonna jump in. I think Jordan, I think I was like that probably the first 20 years of my ministry. And then as I reflected back on that, I could probably count on my hand true crises. And I've been in ministry, past ministry for 26 years. So, and Tim was spot on. I will always say, you need to share with me what this is about. And the vast majority of the times, maybe in a day or two or a week, it's absolutely acceptable. I got a person who at that moment, it's a momentary emotional crisis to them. Can I call somebody? Is your wife there? You know, Joe and our yellow board has got such a shepherd's heart, and when we see it, he can swim by.
Yeah.
But to me, it is so much about raising, pastoring is so much about raising the children. I do not want my children to always be dependent on me. Absolutely not. And so I had to train myself to be good with that approach.
Yeah. It is hard.
I had to train myself to not be the rescuer. And I mean, it doesn't hurt me as staff where you have other pastors who I give Pastor Jim a quick call, be available. The lie is we have so fought the lie that is what good pastors do. We are on call constantly. And that is generational pastoring.
Yeah.
That we have been, that is modeled to us and that we feel guilty if we don't.
Yeah.
And what you're doing, which is why I'm so thrilled to be part of it, is to retrain and continue to provide health and balance in their lives. And I think honors God even more than being the rescuer. You know,
Well, I do think some of it comes with age. I mean, looking at.
When you get as old as Jeff,
I think, yeah, there's more and more, like, the older I get, the more I'm realizing, like, that's not for it. You know what I mean? Or to the ability to refocus and be like, you gotta let that go. So I think, yeah, some of that does come with age. You know, in younger years in ministry, there was so much of, you have to put this fire out, or else the whole church is gonna burn down. And now I'm realizing that you're still gonna be okay. And I love what you said, if you'll repeat it, you gotta let people live in their chaos.
yeah. So it's a simple equation, right? It's no different than what we do when we teach God's word from the pulpit, from a Bible study, or whatever, through our lives, right? We impart our very lives to Him. I'm giving you the information to make a good choice. But all I can do is give you information, because psychologically, you can't make anyone do anything. And you can't change anyone's life or heart. God can, when they're ready. Even God doesn't force change on us. And so I provide information, like to my children. Here's information. You have a choice to make. Now, depending on what choice you make is the consequence you're going to face. Not all consequences are negative. It's a consequence, just it's a result of. Could be a good consequence. We just have that derogatory point of view. We're using consequences as negative. I'll be right with you. And then sometimes that consequence is chaotic. But that's where I learn. That's where I grow. And some of us are slow learners, and some of us have to sit in our chaos for a while. And if I don't let you sit in your chaos and I jump in and rescue you, I will be on repeat speed dial on your phone. Yes, sir. What's your name?
I'm Brian.
Brian.
Thank you. I was late to the party as a believer because the first 33 years of my short 58 years of life, I was not a believer. And that time I spent doing exactly what you're saying. When I was a pastor, climbing the mountain, trying to become more. And, you know, we've all hoped we would have some. When I entered into Christian life, I did the same thing until the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm a third-year deployed student, and I am blessed with mentors and pastors. Now I know why I'm here today, that are trying to encourage me to become what you're talking about today. Because even in my first couple of years of what they get very out of bounds, like I have a new mountain right here. I want to know 4.0, I want to be an A+. And I did all these things at the risk of just upsetting any big time deployed people in here. It was my pastor at my church that said, Brian, I was a B student. Do what you can do.
I was a C's get degrees guy myself, but there you go.
And he said when he was at Grace, I don't know who it was, but Pastor Jim was told, hey, best pastors are B students. That's a completely different discussion. But I have overburdened my life. I'm learning to say no, how important that is, and how important it is that God is directing my life, and I'm not using that as an excuse to go, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this.
Well,
Just assuming that's what he wants me doing. I got to take care of my wife.
Yeah.
It feels great. I can get up every morning. You can't tell by looking. I've lost 60 pounds since January.
good for you.
But that's because of that kind of influence saying, you've got to take care of you.
Yeah.
You want to pastor for 10 years after your 60 or 30 years. You've got to get control of your life, man. And so you got to give the Holy Spirit time to work, and if you don't have rest time, you don't have downtime, you're missing stuff with your kids. It's only because I've got a very short head full of gray hair, but I sleep like a baby at night now. And it doesn't mean I don't make mistakes, but it's because God's number one. There's no way He doesn't want me taking care of my grandchildren and my children, especially my same flesh one. You know, but I sure didn't feel like that when I was younger.
I think some of what Jordan just said and Brian said go hand in hand. Some things do come with age. Jeff and I and the team at the Authentic Pastor were just trying to teach it earlier, so it's prevention instead of intervention. I'm tired of triage in pastors' lives, right? So I have this conversation quite often. Why didn't you call me yesterday? You saw the wall coming. We all saw the wall coming. We saw you accelerating into the wall, but you just kept going, right? So for me, it's a brain aneurysm, and it's a neuralgia, which is in remission finally, and I am med free as of last June. And I just on a side note, I had to take a bipolar med, and I'm not bipolar, but it's the only thing that they experimentally. So if you're bipolar, you take 300 milligrams of what I take. I take 1,200, and it took 2 years to get off the meds because every time you go, your brain titrates, the depression comes back. So you have 2 years of depression, a year of thinking, and then 2 years of depression. And so today, no meds, no depression. But here's what I did, and I want to because I want to take a break and I want to keep transitioning. I appreciate the conversation, and I really appreciate you listening. And again, I never want to be a lecturer, and I'm not smarter than anyone else in this room. I'm just challenging your thinking. I look at people, I'm going to pick on you, Brian. That if Brian stood in the pulpit, 60 pounds heavier, here's what I would say. Why would I listen to you about how to live for my life for Christ? You love Jesus, but you don't love yourself, obviously, right? And you're starting to love yourself. I'm so proud of you. But yeah, but we don't do that. We don't do that. I'm not the epitome of health. I got 15 pounds I can lose, and then another 15, right? Actually, BMI says I need to weigh 160. I haven't weighed 160 since I was a freshman, right? Here's what I know, whether we're dealing with crisis in somebody's life, because if everyone else's crisis is your emergency, the next crisis will be your family's. That's one of the reasons Jordan Squared, I don't know the name, that I can sit in the bleachers and I can pray. God, I just need to give this to you right now because I'm going to do what I'm doing right now because there are other people. I can call an elder. I can call Jerry. I can call Bob. I can call somebody else. I can talk to your wife. I can pass this off for a minute, but I can't pass off parenting. I can't pass off being a partner. You know what else I can't pass off? 5,000 steps a day. 5 o'clock in the morning, I get up every day. So last night, I was on the phone on the way down here because I have to fly to Modesto next week, the church that I'm working with in Modesto. And they were trying to put my schedule together. And they said, well, we've got you scheduled here and here and here and here and here and then this. I said, what time? They said, well, we should be done by 9. I said, oh, no, I'll be back in my hotel by 7. You got to forget everything in between like 9 and 7 after dinner. I said, because I used to do that life. I used to be on the road 180 days a year. I'm back in my hotel at 7 because I'm going to be at bed at 10 and I'm going to be up at 5. And I'm going to force myself to do that on Pacific Standard Time because even traveling, I come first. So this morning, I stayed at this lovely chestnut bed and breakfast over here. And the innkeeper, she's like, what time would you like breakfast? I said, well, I'm up at 5. She says, well, I won't be. I said, could you recommend a morning walk route, right? Because before I do anything else, I stretch before I scroll. That's one of the rules of my life. I hydrate before I caffeinate. That's one of the rules in my life. Everyone else, I mean, get up and first thing you do is pour a cup of coffee. I'm not putting you down, but it's doing something to your brain. You don't know it is. Your brain needs hydration, not caffeine first. I'm going to move. If you looked at my calendar, and I'm happy to show you my calendar, it's not fake, it's my real calendar. It says this time to this time of my day is Tim time. And then at noon, it says Tim time. And then at 4:30, it says Tim time. And nothing comes in the way of Tim time. Because that's how I stay fresh and focused and energized to be the pastor that God gifted me to be to the church he assigned me to serve. And that's how I stay faithful to my calling in Christ, who told me to love myself first. And when I love myself first, the next person I love is the Lord. They go hand in hand. And then I can love others very well. As you look at, like I talked about, aloneness being the root of most other symptoms, right? And we're really good at treating symptoms and putting band-aids on scratches when they got a cancer growing. The cancer, one of the cancers, the leadership cancer in pastoral ministry, because again, numbers don't lie, is this idea that I must sacrifice myself. Jesus didn't say die so you could destroy yourself slowly in his name. He didn't say that. Die to self so you can destroy yourself slowly in my name. And somehow that's what we do. Our health affects everything. What I eat. Like right now, I do have a new neuralgia. Jeff knows about it. I won't go into it. But about a month ago, all of a sudden I had another sharp pain running down the other side of my face. And I immediately thought, oh, no. And it's good news is it's not glossopharyngeal neuralgia. It's its cousin. It's the pain you feel on the outside of your face called trigeminal neuralgia, where it feels like someone is sticking you in the side of the face with 1,000 needles lit on fire throughout the day. This morning I'm really good. The last 4 or 5 days have been really good. And so, but I'm controlling it because they want to put me back on my med. And so my doctor said to me 2 weeks ago, I was sitting in her office, and 3 weeks ago, and she said, you know what we got to do, don't you? And I just started sobbing. She said, you got to go back on that med. I'll eat a bullet before I go on that med. Won't do it. Can't do it. Can't do it. Can't do 2 more years of that, right? So we're eating differently. For the last 10 days, I've eaten nothing but eggs and hamburger. That is all I have eaten. No sauce, no mustard, no ketchup. Nothing. Hamburger. Well, or beef, right? I've eliminated any sugar and grains from my diet. We're just looking at different things. But I do that kind of thing anyway. Why? Because I want to live to be 120. Now, you might think that's stupid. But my point is this. I don't care what age I live. I want to live. I want to be the best. I want to be the best papa that Sir Loxley can ever imagine. That I can still walk and I can still run and I can still climb and I can still play. And I want to have all the energy to do that. I want to be the best in the pulpit I can possibly be. I don't want to be burned out and I don't want to be faking it for my people that my life's got it all together when I'm dying inside, because there's something there that peace and contentment's not there. And I've never found more peace and more contentment and more joy in ministry in 35 years than 5 years ago when I said, I come first. Because when I don't let anything get in the way of that, unless it's a crisis, a massive crisis, I'm better at everything that I do. I will not be a statistic in ministry, and that's not a declaration, that's a statement, that's a truth. I will not be a statistic. God didn't call me to be a statistic. There is no honor in burning out, or flaming out, or wearing out. There's no honor in that. And somehow we've inadvertently accepted that. I'd really like you to think about your wellness and your well-being emotionally, physically, spiritually. I'm not critiquing, I'm encouraging. And I say it this way, that the pastor, all pastors, should be striving to be the healthiest example in the church. You want everyone else to follow our example. Follow me as I follow Christ. That's our mantra. That's repeating after Paul. Follow me as I follow Christ. Well, it's not hard to follow you because you're easy to catch because you're 150 pounds overweight. You're exhausted. I only sleep 3-4 hours a night. That's all I need. What? I'm a night owl. There's no such thing, by the way, physiologically as a night owl. You're sleep deprived is what you are. Chronic stress rewires your brain. I'll give you 3 things. We'll take a break because we started late. So I want to just talk a little bit about science and spirituality, what happens when you don't balance them out. Chronic stress rewires your brain. Literally. It creates this battle between your amygdala and your prefrontal cortex. And they're never in sync. And yet, another reason that we don't chase everyone else's emergency is because I can't live in chronic stress. It's not because I can't chase the emergency. I can chase the emergency, but what I can't do is I can't own your chaos. I didn't make the choice, so the consequence isn't mine, so therefore the chaos can't be either. I can sit with you in your suffering, but it's not going to keep me up at night. I'm going to roll over and go back to bed. By the way, the next morning, Bradley called Gary back, or whoever, that guy who was saying you're going to commit suicide, called that guy back. He didn't kill himself. And then Gary made time for him. But at 2 a.m, he went back to bed. He met him the next morning for breakfast. It was fine. Emotional suppression, which sometimes we do as well, increases our cortisol, and which causes to a risk of depression, which is why the statistics right now of pastoral depression are through the roof. Through the roof. Depression's on the rise. Anxiety's on the rise. Pastoral suicide is on the rise. 65% of pastors, according to Barna, are suffering with depression and anxiety. Clergy are of the top 5 professions prone to burnout. Why is that? Why do we accept that? Why do we allow ourselves to be the most expensive person to get health insurance and life insurance out there? And we wear that like, oh, this is how pastoral ministry is. No, it's what we've made it to be, but it's not what Jesus ever intended. So think about your physical health, your emotional health, how it's impacting your spiritual leadership now. And think about one thing, one shift, just one thing. Whether it be water consumption, whether it be sleep, whether it be food, whether it be diet, whether it be silence. I'll end with this, and so we can take a bathroom break and bio break or whatever we need to do. I quit praying for 6 months. I told you that. And I didn't quit preaching. I preached every week. I can preach without the Holy Spirit. Most of you can too. We do it. I mean, I don't say that like it's something you should be proud of, but we're good at it. And people never know, which is fine because you're not the teacher anyway, the Holy Spirit is. I mean, I can be terrible in the pulpit, and I know God's still going to deliver on His word, right? It's not an excuse. And so after about 6 months of going through my suffering and trying to figure out how we're going to manage this and having to tell my kids, right, that, hey, here's what I got. And Cindy and I just call it my ticking time bomb because I literally have a ticking time bomb in my brain. And I did ask the doctor what I should quit doing. Is there something I shouldn't do? He goes, you shouldn't do cocaine. I'm like, dang, there goes my weekend plan, right? I decided I need to find my way back to intimacy with the Lord. And it wasn't on my knees, and it wasn't through a prayer list. It was Psalm 46:10. The most ignored recipe in God's word. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted. It's 1 + 1 = 2. It's sitting in the bleachers and being able to go, God, I can't touch this right now. At least not till halftime. I'm not walking out on this quarter and my kid shooting free throws. I'll just let you do it. Be still. God, I'm not chasing every problem, and I'm not ignoring my body that you gave me today, because the first gift you ever gave me as a human being was this body. And I'm called to make it a temple and to honor it. And so I'm not letting something get in the way of it today, God. I'm going to be still. Stillness isn't a posture, it's a state of being. You can be still in chaos. And so in stillness and silence is where I reconnected with the Lord. And I've never known him more in my entire life than I do today by practicing stillness as a way of life and silence as a daily practice. It's the same idea, and we'll use this as a segue before we take a break, that Jesus said, I will build my church, and the gates of hell won't prevail against it. He didn't tell you to build the church. He said, I will build the church. You just love sheep, and you love people. Feed my lambs. And if we just let Jesus build the church, knowing the gates of hell will prevail against it, then you not doing everything and burning yourself out, because it's got to get done unless a pastor does it, isn't going to do any great damage either if you take a day off and you learn to Sabbath and you learn to be still and take care of your body and take care of your mind and take care of your relationships. God will be exalted. He'll take care of it. Christ will continue to build his church, but he doesn't need you to die on the altar of ministry to do it. And if you haven't been taught that before, then I just want to give you permission to make yourself a priority. That honors God far more than you ever burning out. That's much more honoring to him. And you know, the greatest example you'll set for the church is when you learn to say no so that they can step up and say yes themselves. Because if you continue to sacrifice yourself, they don't have to serve. They become dependent on you. And you and I inadvertently become the savior. So just take a break. We'll come back. Be thinking about any questions you possibly want. Matter of fact, on your table, there are some questions. I don't care if you answer them or not. You can talk about them. But there's a QR code on there. The QR code's for a survey I've done with 1,500 pastors so far. If you give me 3 minutes to do a survey, I'll give you a half hour or more of my time on the phone to talk about anything you possibly want. And if you just fill out the survey for no other reason, then I'll send you a tool that I wrote on practicing stillness, 10 steps to stillness in your life. I'll bombard you with every PDF you possibly want, but I got to have your information. So you got to fill out a survey for me. Take you 3 minutes someday to do it. So use the bathroom, grab a cup of coffee, meet someone you don't know. Smoke them if you got them. So there you go.
what was important for me was to go deeper with my faith, to go deeper with what I'm wanting God to reveal in my life. The current class I'm in right now is a Christian leadership class. I have absolutely loved it. That's what I want to go deeper with, is how can I be a more efficient leader that can engage and inspire and help change the culture in church, period.
Grace Seminary has become poised to leverage its resources for new avenues of equipping ministry leaders.
The center is located at Grace Theological Seminary and offers programs to equip and encourage church planters and ministry leaders through mentor-based cohorts, annual events, retreats, and ongoing training sessions, along with a repository of presentation topics and academic, spiritual, mental, and essential ministry programs.
what was important for me was to go deeper with my faith, to go deeper with what I'm wanting God to reveal in my life. The current class I'm in right now is a Christian leadership class. I have absolutely loved it. That's what I want to go deeper with, is how can I be a more efficient leader that can engage and inspire and help change the culture in church, period.
Grace Seminary has become poised to leverage its resources for new avenues of equipping ministry leaders.
The center is located at Grace Theological Seminary and offers programs to equip and encourage church planters and ministry leaders through mentor-based cohorts, annual events, retreats, and ongoing training sessions, along with a repository of presentation topics and academic, spiritual, mental, and essential ministry programs.
what was important for me was to go deeper with my faith, to go deeper with what I'm wanting God to reveal.
Right? Like tech teams forget there is a Holy Spirit in the room, right? Because we're streaming live. So I appreciate some of the kind words in the break. Again, I never want anyone to hear anything other than encouragement and affirmation and validation of God's goodness to you and His gifting in your life and your call to Christ. I was starting to tell Angie that both of my sons work for me. They have their entire life. When they were away at school, it was the only time that they weren't on staff. They were still on salary, but they weren't on staff. And my sons make me better. My wife says it this way: if it weren't for your sons, you couldn't find your butt with both hands. It's a true statement. And I've got people in my life that help me with that. And but last January, Kelton, my youngest, who Jeff knows, we had breakfast together. And yeah, I said he's an interesting kid. He was 18 years old, and when he was 17, to graduate from high school, you had to do a senior project of some kind. I live in a rural community. For most kids, that means we build a deer blind, and that helped you graduate, right? My son said, "Dad, I want to make a documentary on ancient Rome." I said, "What?" "Yeah." I say, "Well, okay." He said, "Well, there's only problem with that." I said, "What is it?" He goes, "Well, we got to go to Rome so I can film it." Okay, this senior project got very expensive. But Dad has 500,000 frequent flyer miles, and so we're going to Rome. And I bought him a little rinky-dink camera. And so a year later, he got this bug to make films, and he's in Minneapolis filming the X Games. And he's on his way home, and he goes, "Hey, I wanted to call real quick and let you know that I'm dropping out of film school." I said, "We'll talk about it when you get home." He goes, "No, there's nothing to talk about." Why don't you have this conversation with your mother, who's an educator, right? Let's see how this is going to go. And so he did. And I called a friend of mine in LA and said, "Hey, Kelton wants to drop out of film school." He goes, "That's terrific, because we have to retrain him once he comes out of school." He said, "No one's going to hire him because he's got all this information, but he can't apply it to the real world." And when I think about him, I think about pastors. A lot of information, but implementation, right, and integration, much different. And I said to him, I said, Kelton, why do you love pastors so much? Why do you want to quit filming? He wants to quit filming now and just do the authentic pastor with his whole life. And he's been wanting to do that for a while. And he's almost there. I mean, he doesn't have to film anymore, except the phone call came a couple weeks ago. And so today he's in South Africa shooting rhinos or something and filming the whole thing or whatever for TV shows. So he goes, I said, "Why are you so passionate about pastors, Kelton?" He said, "Dad, I've traveled the world with you. I've been to the slums of Kwangari, and I've been to the White House, and I've been to every pastor's conference you've ever taught. And I've had pastors in our house, and I've seen all your seminars, and I know hundreds of pastors." He said, "Here's why I'm passionate about what we do. Because every pastor's kid deserves a dad like mine. You're the real deal, Pop." Now, here's what's interesting about that. This is the same kid who one morning, I'm driving in the driveway at 7:30 after catching a red-eye flight home from someplace in the world. As I'm driving, I was in Italy, and so I was driving home. Pulled in the driveway, exhausted. I got into Detroit about 5 o'clock, made it home. As I'm driving in, he's driving out to school. He says, "Where'd you go? Gas station?" I said, "What? Why are you leaving so early? Did you have to go get gas for mom's car or something?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "I'm asking where you been." I said, "I've been in Italy for the last week." He goes, "Oh, I didn't know you were gone." Huh. So when my kids were like 18 and 21, I said to them, I said, "Boys, do you regret, what your dad does for a living?" And they said the same thing. "Dad, we've traveled the world. We've been all over the place." I said, "But I was gone for a lot of your life." They said, "But when you were home, home." And my oldest said, "Dad, I remember the day that you flew home on a Friday night on a red-eye flight from London to come watch my state track finals. And then you flew out at night to go back to London because you still had to speak." He said, "I can remember many times like that. You never missed what was important. And when you were home, Dad, you were always home. I never had to vie for your time." That's kind of why we go back to the basketball and the emergency crisis, right? Oh, I want to say about that Jordan squared real quick. One of the ways I solved the problem? I don't take my phone in with me. My phone will sit there all day long, and it's not just today, but my phone never rings. My phone never buzzes. There's not one notification on my telephone that goes off. I allow no notifications. No one. Even Cindy knows that if it's an emergency, I'll check it within a half hour, but I don't let it ring on my desk. I don't let it ring because your urgency is not my emergency. Because it just cuts into me getting done with my stuff so at 4:30 I can go home and swim and be a husband, right? Hear me on this. Everything we just talked about this morning, I want you to consider your relational health. Jordan and I were talking about his dissertation and his focus on the loneliness of leadership, which is crazy because that's my focus. And so we're going to just, I'm going to give him all my stuff. Do it quick. All right, there you go. And no one will even know. And he mentioned something interesting. He talked about what's the remedy for aloneness. God gave us the problem and he gave us the solution at the same time. The remedy for aloneness is relationship. And a lot of pastors are lonely. So when I talk about health and wellness, I'm not just talking about physical health. I'm not just talking about movement. I'm just not talking about motion. I'm just not talking about better eating and better habits and better principles and better rhythms and routines in your life. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally. That what makes us whole. Spirit, soul, body, mind, all of it. But hear me on this. Everything we talked about isn't the whole story. It's just half. Because you can get your life in order. You can be whole and healthy and well, and you can be hitting on all cylinders and setting the greatest example for your congregation possible in life. And so there's two sides of the health coin in pastoral ministry today, from my perspective, from numbers and research again. One is your life, but the other one is really how we've been taught to lead. Because in order to make yourself a priority, there's other things you have to give up, like doing everything. Because that's not our job. It's not our job. The flip side of learning to care for yourself is learning how to stop carrying everyone else. And you could be sitting here thinking, yeah, I get it. I know, right? I take care of myself, but the real problem is I'm still carrying the whole dang church on my shoulders. You ever feel like that? Anybody? I want us to look at Ephesians 4:12 together. Now, we really want us to look at it. I want to put a couple words in your mind, and then I'm going to leave them hang in the air, and then I want to go on. I want you to think about the difference between being irreplaceable and indispensable. And is there a difference? And does it matter? Irreplaceable and indispensable, if you're jotting notes down. Paul says, and I said, the only job description I can find in Scripture for a pastor is to equip saints for the work of service. Now, you could add discipleship, teaching, serving. You could add other words to that, but that's not our mandate. Our mandate is to equip. And so my little Timism is you can prepare saints for service or you can prepare services for saints. One of those is biblical. And one of those is what we do and what we hire staff to do. I mean, we are so good. I'm working at another church right now, and I just got done helping them rewrite some of their mission and vision and on this issue of discipleship. And we had to go back over this whole idea. And one of the things I said to them is you've got to quit hiring talent and start developing it. Quit just hiring more professional pastors and ministry leaders to do the work of ministry. That's not what that verse says. It doesn't say hire people to do the work of ministry. It says equip the people in the pews to do the work of ministry. Pastoral ministry has become a polished profession. And as it has, the church has become a spectator sport. There's a reason the church is in decline, and you can't fix what you don't admit, first of all. That comes to the great theologian, Dr. Phil. Okay. If the church is in decline, are we going to continue to blame the enemy for it? Or are we going to look within? There's two things that data-wise I know that are not talked about in pastoral circles today. Two things people are looking for in pastoral leadership, or just religious leadership, not even pastoral leadership in general. Number one, authenticity, which we just barely touched on, right? There's no gap, no delta between who you are and who you say you are. Number one. Number two, people will not be relegated to the role of spectator in the church anymore. Now, we've created a consumer culture, and we are in a consumer culture, and we've created a spectator culture inadvertently. Again, I'm not throwing rocks at us. People want to do something. They want their life to matter. And so we equip. We prepare them for service. We don't prepare services for them. My dad always said that people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And then he quoted some Bible person or leader about that. And some of you have quoted people too and give them the wrong credit for it. Theodore Roosevelt actually said that. And how do people know you care for them? So as you think about this equation, then I want you to talk out loud and be honest with each other. That first of all, would you agree with this? Lives are changed through relationships. I mean, relationship was the remedy in Genesis 2. So revelation, then relationship. So you can't really argue with me because God said it. So you know, in other words, what I wanted to say earlier was a relationship with God is not enough. How many times have you said that? Jesus and me, that's all I need. I'm sorry, that's not true. Who said so? Jesus. Argue with him. Because if a relationship with God was enough, it would still be Adam and God sitting on a rock in the garden. So relationships, lives are changed through relationships, period. Anyone disagree? You can. Second part of that, relationships that change lives take what? Okay, so now let's get down to it. Time. I'll get pastors who tell me that, man, I'm exhausted. I'm worn out. I feel crunchy, crispy, toasty, lonely. And my response is, hey, could you send me a screenshot of your calendar off of Google? And I will tell you, within looking at 3 weeks of your life, what your problem is. Just let me audit your calendar. The last pastor did that. I just wrote a blog about him that comes out tomorrow. He doesn't know that I just did that. didn't put his name on it, but 20,000 people are going to read his story tomorrow. And he told me last week in the coaching call, he goes, I just don't feel like I can ever do enough. I got to do more. I got to do more. I got to do more. I said, you're the same guy a month ago that sent me your calendar that had no margin. You write line to line, man. My wife's a 7th grade English teacher. She would failed you because you didn't use any white space, right? There's no white space in your life, leadership, home, church, any of it. And so when I looked at his calendar and I saw there's, first of all, if you look at my calendar, you'll see that in between every appointment, there's 15 minutes for me. Just 15 minutes for me. Sometimes it's just sitting there doing nothing. Sometimes I transfer from this chair to the recliner. I just sit there. And then my phone, like my watches went off multiple times this morning already because it tells me to breathe. I got my breathing app that goes off on the hour. And when it goes off, I breathe. People go, really? Makes a difference. Really controls without getting into it, your vagus nerve. Lots of things you learn when they tell you what your disease is, right? And so I'm just passing on what I know because of having to do that. But my dad would always say, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care, right? And what the inventor would say is, what people want to know is, the only thing people really want to know is, does my pastor love me? Which made me ask the question years ago, well, how would they know if I'm sitting in an office? You know you can't love people from an office? You know that? When I built a church 29 years ago, I built a church without offices. We built onto the church 3 times. You know what we've never added? Offices. We have an office for 6 people. Oh, it's not a big office. It's like 12 by 14. There's 2 desks in it. You have to schedule time to share the desk. You know what we got them instead of building them an office? Laptops and a backpack. So there's a rule in our church that says, it's kind of an unwritten rule for our staff, but that if you spend more than 40% of your time in the building, it's grounds for termination. And my staff knows it. It's when they get hired. If you spend more than 40% of your time in this building and not with people, it's grounds for termination. Because you don't change anyone's life by making programs pretty and polished. You change people's lives face to face, life on life. Now, going back to the emergency crisis issue, I schedule time in my life for crisis. I plan that something's going to come up. Doesn't mean I'm going to respond to it at the moment, but if you look at my calendar, my colors for relationships are orange. 50% of my calendar is built for relationships. Now, that's a little upside down right now because my travel schedule's picked up more than I thought it would again. So between relationships and coaching and then my own family and church and everything and my own job, I'm a little out of whack. And I'm not going to sit up here and pretend that my life I've got all my rhythms and routines right. They're principles I'm trying to follow. That's why I'm trying to share them with you. So here's my question. What percentage of your time in ministry do you spend with people who aren't on the payroll? No, that's a real question. It's live.
My wife's my secretary and worship leader, so.
Yeah, that doesn't count. That doesn't count. You just skewed the results right there. Go ahead.
Just because the last few weeks our staff has just been racking up brain about what are we going to do about that office space. We are out of room, and we have a great problem. We need more ministry space. So we're not arguing, but we're like, why take away another office to create a ministry space? And I'm sitting here thinking, duh, because the kids are way more important than having an office space. We need to make room for that. It's perfect that you're saying that, because how often do people walk inside the walls of the church when they do Brian? You know,
They don't.
know where they're at.
Yeah, which is also hard, right? That's another one of our excuses, and I use it as an excuse. It's hard to get with people. Yes, it's hard to get with people. People are busy. People are at work. I can't just drop in and hang out behind the bank teller counter with you. I thought I'd come visit. How much money's in that drawer? You know, you should increase your offering. Things like that. So it is hard to get with people. And I know I use a lot of, I'm just using examples from my life because I try to apply what I share. I don't, you can't lie and be theauthenticpastor.com, right? That's the inauthenticpastor.com. That would probably sell better. We should change the name, Jeff. My team at church knows that I'm going to have an appointment with every one of them every week. And they know it's an appointment to talk about nothing ministry related. I don't want my worship pastor, my youth pastor, my connections pastor, my executive pastor. I don't want them to know that every time I see them, I just want to talk about something at the church. And so I call it wasting time. I love wasting time with people. The greatest impact I've ever had in people's lives was not anything official. It was a waste of time. Hey, you want to waste some time? And that's what I tell them. Like Kenny, who's my worship pastor, and I'm working on my own album, and I said to him, "Hey, dude, I'd like to waste some time with you. Bring your guitar. Just want to waste about an hour." And he'll say, "Hey, I got some thoughts about Easter for worship." I go, "Well, we'll have to talk about that during a different time. This is not that time. This is not ministry. This is not work. We're wasting time together. Schedule. If you want to talk about church stuff, schedule that on my calendar. But right now, we're wasting time together." I want my team, just like my children, to always say, it wasn't always about work. You know, I read these blogs and these articles about having meetings and stuff with people and how to have meetings and stuff with people in your church and the whole deal. And it's really hard. So last Friday, I've been trying to get these 3 retired guys together for a month. And retired people are busy. They're busier than working people, right? You guys got time for breakfast? No, don't. What do you do? You know? And so I got them all together literally last Friday. They all showed up at my office. And so I told them I would make them breakfast because I didn't want to go out to breakfast because I'm eating eggs and beef, right? And so we had eggs and I made them sausage and I ate eggs. And they said, so what's the meeting about? I said, about nothing. We're just wasting time together. So I just wanted to waste some time with you. You want to talk about church stuff? Not tonight, not this morning. I just want to waste time with you. I don't want to be your pastor this morning. I just want to waste time with you and eat eggs. Can't we just do that? And you ever find that people want to force you to be pastoral all the time? Because if the pastor's there, we got to talk about Jesus, right? No, we don't. Jesus can be present without being preached, right? Just wasting time. What did Jesus do with his disciples for 3.5 years? Yes, he discipled them. He trained his replacements. We're going to talk about that in a second. That's the number one thing we should learn about Jesus. He trained his replacements in 3.5 years and then worked himself out of a job. We should be doing the same thing. Because if Jesus wouldn't have been training his replacements, like most of us would have decided to start discipleship 201 after 3.5 years. Jesus gave them just enough to be dangerous and then got out of the way. It's a great example to follow. How much time do you spend, no one answered this question honestly yet, with people? What percentage of time do you spend with people? And you don't have to even be wasting time. People in your church, what percentage of your week is spent with people? And no, Sunday morning doesn't count. That's a crowd. It's a challenging question, isn't it?
My algorithm was turned off because I invited a guy from my church to join me today. He canceled this morning. So like my number was going to be higher.
I know it's hard, and the reason I put this out there is not to heap any like guilt or shame. It's just a wake up call. Because if I would say to you, hey, could you name the Sunday school lesson that transformed your life in Christ? You wouldn't have one. Can you tell me about this summer camp theme that captured your heart? No. What is the one sermon that just absolutely wrecked your walk with Christ and drew you closer to a relationship with the Lord? I don't know. I don't know either, but I can tell you about Jim Graham. Jim Graham was my summer camp director. I don't remember a word Jim Graham ever said. I went every year to Taylor University, heard him teach, sat in his classes, watched him up front. He was the director, but he was also the keynote speaker most of the time. And I was 16 years old. There was a knock on my door at summer camp on Sunday. We just got there. We were unloading our stuff. There's a knock on my door. I opened up the door, and there's Dr. James Graham. And heck of a pastor from Phoenix, teacher at Fuller. And he says, give it to me. Give you what? Give it to me. I love summer camp because I could sell a lot of weed to pastors' kids. So I went through rehab twice by the time I was 18. Jim just knew that I had managed to bring in like a quarter pound of weed to camp, right? Enough to go to jail for it, some states, right? And he took it. And he said, come with me. I'm like, oh, I'm going to die. My father's going to kill me. He said, bring your stuff. Get all your stuff. Get your bag and your sleeping bag and everything. Okay. Where are we going? Going home? He goes, no, you're going to be my roommate this week. So you know what summer camp directors do, right? They get up at 4 a.m. and they go to bed at 2 a.m. And everything in between, they put out fires because everything's a crisis at summer camp with 350 kids or whatever. Every place Jim went, Tim went. I was his shadow. I ate when he ate. I slept when he slept. I didn't sleep when he didn't sleep. I had to be every place where Jim was. It was the only place that I couldn't go. You know, if I was going to stay there and not have my dad kill me, then I had to be Jim Graham's roommate. And I'll never forget on the last night, he asked me the most important question of my life. This is the question that changed my life. If you want to know the turning point of my life, this was it. What do you want on your pizza tonight? I said, what? What do you want on your pizza? I said, I don't know. He said, well, all other cabins and dorms and stuff get pizza, and it's you and I kind of like pizza. What do you want on your pizza? I said, mushrooms. And I said, that's it. He said, what? I said, well, you can do double mushrooms if you want. I really like mushrooms. So we sat and ate a double mushroom pizza all night long. Never went to bed. And then in the morning, he says to me, so next year when you come back, I said, what? He said, next year when you come back, I can come back. Well, don't bring a bale of weed with you this time, but yeah. He said, could you write next year's camp theme song and perform it? Sorry. I said, yeah. He said, you're a good musician. You should do that. You should come back. And you should call me when you need help to get your life right. 5 years later, I became the camp director at Taylor University because a man asked me what I wanted on my pizza, and he just wasted time with me. Not 1 week did he, not all week long did he ever lecture me or give me a Bible study or preach at me. He asked about my life. He knew everything about me by the end of the week. He knew what broke my heart. And the one thing I know that I fail at being a pastor is wasting enough time with people. I got people in my church that I don't know them. Usually by the time I walk out of my office and I feel like I'm ready to go, it's 10:20. I walk in the green room at 10:25. At 10:30, At 10:30, worship starts. And by 11:30, when I walk off the stage, 80% of the people have already left the building, right? I got to work really hard. And so I said to my assistant, I said, listen, I need more time with people. She said, you don't have any more time to give. What if I put them together in groups of 6 or 7 and just set up lunches or set up breakfast? I said, sure, just tell them there's no agenda. There's no business cards. There's no brochures, right? There's nothing that we have to accomplish. And here's the question I ask, and I know I'm talking a lot on this because I want to get to this point. I want to give you my mushroom pizza question. As pastors, we're supposed to have a lot of information, a lot of answers. We're supposed to tell people what we know. After all, they pay us, right? Or they think they do. I mean, we work for somebody. But if I was going to go out with Brian and get to know Brian and waste time with Brian, I've got one question I'm going to ask Brian before this day's over. Brian, so what breaks your heart, man? What breaks your heart?
Being lonely.
You know what? That breaks my heart too for you because God didn't intend for us to be lonely. I'm going to continue that conversation, and I'll have that conversation with Brian after this day's over. Make sure I get your information. But 9 times out of 10, when I ask somebody in my congregation, so what breaks your heart, you know what their answer is? I don't know. You don't know what breaks your heart? So why don't you know? Never thought about it. So why have you thought about it? Because no one's ever asked me before. And when I started doing that about 20 years ago, I realized that I need to start telling people what I know and asking them what they think and start asking them what they feel. Because Jesus didn't ransom my mind, he ransomed my heart. He took out of my heart of stone, he put in the heart of flesh. He lives in my heart. I have a thinking center and a feeling center. Physiologically, that's how we are made. And you know, we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts every day, and 90% of them are completely unconscious thoughts. And the rest of them are mostly on autopilot and routine. We are in this automatic way of thinking, and a lot of them we don't control. And so then you pause to somebody and so, Jeff, what do you think about this? And Jeff goes, what's the minute? I don't even know what you're talking about. I haven't studied that yet. And I'm supposed to have an answer like, hey, what do you think about our church growth strategy? I don't know. I thought that was your job. What do you think about should we pave the parking lot? I don't know. What do you think? I don't know what I think. Let me give you a couple of days to think about it. I don't want to know what you think. And it's not because I don't care what you think. I want to know what you feel. So when someone tells me, so what breaks my heart? Like, you know what breaks my heart? The elderly who live alone. That breaks my heart. That's an answer I got a few months ago. And I said, so let me ask you another question. So what would you do about that if nothing were standing in your way and you knew you couldn't fail? I don't know. Here's another question. So would you be willing to pray about it with me for an entire week? For God to give you 3 crazy ideas, exceedingly abundantly more than you can think or ask ideas? Because I'm going to ask you again next week. Or their question is, I don't know what breaks my heart. Hey, so I got another question for you. So would you be willing to pray about it for a couple of weeks for God to break your heart with something, to wreck you, to put a tear in your eye, a lump in your throat, a pit in your stomach, just to drive you crazy about something that keeps you up at night? And 2 weeks later, I'll say, so what breaks your heart? Foster kids. Hit me in the middle of the night. Foster kids. Panda bears in China going extinct breaks my heart, right? And my answer to that would be, that's awesome because God made panda bears and he loves panda bears, right? I don't care what their answer is. I care that something breaks their heart. Because if something breaks their heart, it's an assignment from heaven. My job as a pastor is to help you do it. Let me give you a biblical example. Matthew chapter 14, Jesus feeds 5,000 people, right? Right or wrong? Wrong. No. Okay.
And women and children.
Right. Jesus fed 5,000 people plus women and children, right?
That sounds like a trick question. I don't know.
Wrong. Obviously, yes, it's a trick question. Jesus didn't feed anybody. Why? Because it wasn't his idea. There's two great accounts of this to look at. It's Philip who approaches Jesus, and I'll take a little liberty to make a narrative out of it. Jesus is getting late, the crowd's getting hungry, and we should send him home. Now, what Philip is really saying is, hey, the guys and I are starving. And it's getting late, and we haven't eaten all day long. Could you send these people home? Right? Which just also proves to me that the disciples were teenagers, right? Because I biblically believe only Peter was older than 20, the rest were younger than 20. Only Peter paid the temple tax. The disciples were teens, at least 11 of them. So I'll argue that one with any good professor. Is Jesus as a rabbi? You know how good rabbis teach? They don't teach like I do. They don't teach like most of you. What's a rabbi do? Ask questions. So, Lane, what's 2 plus 2?
4.
That would be wrong, right? Because that's right. Because that's what we do. But if you're a rabbi asking a Talmudine a question, the Talmudine is going to ask you a question in return. So, what is 2 plus 2? And your answer would be, so what is 16 divided by 4? And then, Tiberius would go, so what is 8 divided by 2? Oh. And then Andrew would say, oh, so what is the square root of 16? Did anyone say 4? Did everyone get the right answer? Jesus is getting late. Why don't we send the crowd home so they can eat? And Jesus says, why don't you feed them? Question to a question. The good student replies back to the rabbi with another question. What would I feed them with? Now, the youth pastor would go, don't worry about it, go play foosball, I'll order pizza. Right? Jesus replies, what have you got? Question, 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 question. Now that stumps them. Why don't you go look? And then they go, and they find an 8-year-old second grader with a fillet of fish with a bite out of it, and they bring him to Jesus. Now, if you're the only 8-year-old in a crowd of 5,000 men plus women and children, are you giving up your lunch? How do you get somebody to give up their time, their talent, their treasure to serve in the church? You invite them into the process. You ask a question. Now, this is completely out of the book of 3 Timothy as I go on right here, okay? When Jesus called his disciples, he basically said, you guys want to change the world? Lakakai. Follow me. And they said they left everything to follow him. How do you get an 8-year-old boy to give up his fish and loaves? Hey, kid, what you got in the basket? You want to change the world? Lakakai. Bring your basket. I want to introduce you to my rabbi. Jesus didn't feed 5,000 people because it wasn't Jesus' idea. All Jesus did was release the potential and equip the saints for the work of service. So when someone says to me, what breaks your heart? Lonely, foster care, aging adults, panda bears in China, name it. My response is, so what you can do about it if nothing's standing in your way? I don't know. And they come back with some crazy dumb idea. My last response as a pastor is, so how can I help you do that? You know what I don't do in the last 20 years of my ministry? I don't plan programs or events for anybody, and neither does my staff. If it doesn't come out of the heart of the congregation, we don't do it. So let me give you an illustration that has got me kicked out of places like this. This is going to sound like a leap, and this really is relevant to what we're talking about. And then I'm just going to digress and leave the floor open about how we create shared ownership. Because what I'm talking about in this session is taking care of yourself and then empowering people to be the church, in the church, as the church, treating people as co-equals and training them as co-laborers. Which means what I do is not that important unless it becomes my identity. Here's the leap. How do you make a baby? How do you make a baby? What's it take to make a baby? That is the Sunday school way of saying it. What's it take to make a baby? An egg and a sperm. Can you say sperm on this campus? Because I just did.
Yes.
Good. It's a 50-50 equation. For many years of my ministry, I used to make ministry babies all day long. I can sit in my office. I can sit down with my team. We can conceive some crazy idea. We'll gestate that thing. We'll carry that thing out. We'll birth that. And then we'll ask the whole congregation to adopt it and wonder why no one showed up. Man, we're killing ourselves around here. We are planning, we are polishing, we are creating worship services, amazing sermons. I put 20 hours into a sermon this week, which I can never figure that out, by the way. I don't think I got more than 2 hours in a sermon for the last 10 years, really. Because I just realized the adult attention span is only 8 minutes. So why am I working on a 30-minute sermon, right? And I have more conversations with church staffs who are so frustrated that they can't have anyone involved. No one wants to volunteer. Anyone ever have a problem with volunteers? Is it just me? Just my church? Jordan, problem with volunteers? Ever? Never? You, good for you. Lane, no? Ever? People coming out of the woodwork to do whatever you want? Most of the time, no? You got a good volunteer base? Seasonal. Tim? My mom always said it this way, you know, like you've heard the cliche, 20% of the people do 80% of the work, right? And here's why. It's not because they don't love Jesus. It's there's no jobs left. Because the pastor's kids are doing them all. That's what my mom would say, right? No, there's no jobs left because there's actually only so much people the church can do. You got 100 people or 1,000 people in your church. How many jobs could there possibly be? Why don't people volunteer and show up for all your events and your programs and love everything that you do? Because it's your baby. It's your baby. If you want people to get excited, include them in the conception process. For those of you who are married, you remember the conception process, right? I mean, it's not hard work. It's not a chore, right? It's pretty good. It can be a little awkward at first, but you get better at it, and then you find more pleasure in it, and no one turns it down most of the time. Same thing with ministry design. Hey, I'd like to have a meeting. I'd like to invite you in, and I'd like to ask you a question. So what breaks your heart? Single moms. Or Christy, a lady in my church, she's like, young families, we just moved here, and this is not where our family's from, so my kids don't really have grandparents. And so it kind of breaks my heart that girls like mine don't have grandparents. Pam, who's also in the meeting, says, that's crazy. You know what breaks my heart? That I don't have any grandkids around. My grandkids don't live around here. Oh, this is a Reese's peanut butter cup moment. This is peanut butter and chocolate. We'll call it the Holy Spirit. We call it Reese's. That's his nickname. Okay. We put them together. So what would you guys do to help grandparents, senior citizens have grandkids and grandkids connect with older adults? I don't know. Why don't you pray about it for a week? Let's come back together. And then they come back together and they come up with this crazy plan, which is actually DUM stupid. And I'm thinking, that's a dumb plan. That'll never work. But I'm not going to intervene, right? Because it's a choice, chaos, consequences, figure it out. I'm going to try to prevent you from doing something crazy. I turn them over to my XP, and within a month, all I know, we've got this brand new ministry in the church. You know who I don't have to ask to come to it? Anybody who is part of the conception process. Why? You're going to take care of your own baby. I watch pastors all the time, thinking it's their responsibility to plan and create and come up with all these brilliant ideas to grow the church and get to people to come. And it never works. And then some Yahoo in my emails tell me all the time I can double my church in a year. And the only way I know that works is if you involve people in the conception process. So when is the last time you sat down with people and invited them into the directional mission of your church? Not where do you think we should go? What's your heart say? How do you feel about this? I think that's the biggest other cancer that we face. And the bigger issue than that is time. So I'm just encouraging you today to really consider the time that you spent on yourself and on people. Because lives are changed through relationships, and relationships that change lives take time. The first relationship you should focus on is the relationship you have with yourself. And out of the abundance of that relationship, you will find more time to invest in people. You'll see more fruit for your ministry than you ever will by doing it yourself, by burning yourself out, by burning a candle in the middle. Slower growth, but deeper growth with deeper roots. And I think both of those major principles, there's more we could talk about and whatever you want to talk about, have been inadvertently hijacked by the Western church culture since the emergence of the church growth movement in the late 70s. And the population that God has placed us in America is starving for Jesus. But they're looking for leadership who will give them their time and listen to them and involve them in the work of the church. It's much different than it's been for the last 30, 40 years. I'm not a prophet, but I believe that we are seeing pastors and ministry leaders dropping like flies, and I'm hoping for a new generation to take their place who are hungry for the change that Jesus is doing in his church. I think that is what is happening in the church today, for what it's worth. I think you are important in all that you do. I think you ought to find yourself important enough to put yourself first, and then realize that you don't have to do it all. Because if you have to do it all, it probably doesn't need done in the first place. There's a lot of ministry babies we could let die, as morose as that illustration now sounds. But if people don't own the the ownership of it from the beginning, they're probably not going to get involved, and we shouldn't expect them to, because I don't really want to raise your baby, but I'd love to conceive one with you and then carry that through. That will fill your pews. That will keep people engaged. That will save your marketing budget, by the way, as well, because you don't have to convince people to show up to something that they already conceived. So I'd encourage you to think about two things this week. One small shift in how much time you give yourself, and one small shift in how much time you waste with other people. If that's all you heard from me in 2.5 hours, the rest of it doesn't matter. If you could take that away, I really believe that would transform your life and your leadership and your ministry. So, in all of that or anything else, I appreciate you listening as I talk more than I planned on. Thoughts, questions, different topics, things that we could bounce around the room. Julie wanted to make this a panel discussion, and I said, no, I like to hear myself talk. So,
Just to
yeah, Laura.
rewind on something way earlier, when you were talking about the counselor getting that phone call and the comment that you made to him, I at first had a problem with that, and I was because I think you answered it, so let me see if I.
Okay, let's make sure I did.
I at first had problems reconciling that with, here's a person that's saying they're gonna take your life, and you talking about your own depression and what that's like, and it's not selfish, it's the way to survive. So so then you tell the person those three things and hang up. What I think I heard you say later, perhaps, in the nuance of it, is that you kind of maybe had it, or that counselor had a history with that person and knew it really wasn't serious at the
Correct.
moment.
Right.
Okay.
It wasn't a call out of the blue. Been counseling that person for a long time.
Right, yeah, and so I wanted to make sure that other people hear that too,
Yeah.
because it's such an epidemic in our.
Well, it
society.
goes back to relationships matter,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is why then, I mean, like in my own situation where Cindy surrounds me with like literal babysitters.
Right,
Like, are we gonna play Monopoly today? Kind of thing.
right, yeah, absolutely, because you matter, and that person matters, but that person that needs to sleep matters too, and so it's that question of, is this a crisis in that moment, they really do need
Yeah.
somebody, they need that sitter, or is it, that they're,
Yeah. Don't hear my illustrations of I don't have a heart.
right, and I
You
didn't
know,
hear that.
we all no. I know that. I'm just saying in general, we all have a pastor's heart. God has put that into us, and but sometimes that also means boundaries.
Absolutely.
Jordan.
I needed some help, personally, and was, dealing with burnout, quite a few years ago. The counselor asked me the question, what are you actually responsible for? And it was a really freeing thing. It was actually discerning what I'm responsible for. I'm curious how you would answer that question. Have you thought through the process, being a pastor, and so if you were asked that, what are you responsible for? Thinking about your pastoral role, how do you, what are the boundaries and things? How do you answer that question?
Well, I have to answer from my giftings, right? But also from this biblical standpoint of Ephesians 4, I say my responsibility is I'm responsible for releasing other people's potential. So that sounds ambiguous, but for me, it's not. So if I want you to be the very best you can be, that's sometimes where I'm going to let you own your own problems. It's other terms where I'm going to recognize that. So like if I had to go what I'm really responsible for, it's real simple. Leadership development and teaching. No, that's on paper. Leadership development and teaching. That's all I do at our church. You don't want me to do anything else because I'll mess it up. And so I only have two things until I retire. There's only two things I'm doing: developing leaders, which is discipleship, and teaching. Now, it's not that I'm doing all the teaching. I'm just making sure the church is getting taught well. I should not be in the pulpit every Sunday, and I'm not, because I don't want to ever create. And this is my point of view, and some people don't have this depending on the size of your church. I don't want you to have one diet from one guy. I love to teach. I love to teach on Sunday mornings, but I only probably teach about half the year, even if I'm there. The rest of the time, sometimes I'm just like, I just missed 3 Sundays in a row. I'm here 2 Sundays and then I'm gone next Sunday. Then I'm taking off for 5 weeks in the summertime. And so I have to make sure that people can teach. What does that mean? I release their potential. That's equipping saints for the work of service. So what am I really responsible for? I'm responsible to make sure everyone knows their place in the cause of Christ. That's how I answer that. But I couldn't say I'm responsible for the bulletin. I'm not responsible for the bulletin. I don't give a rip if we have a bulletin or not. I care that somebody has the gift to do that, or the screens and what Christian's doing back there, right? And so that's great. My job's not to do it. There's very few things in the church that I do. So I'm going to answer it this way. I'm still answering your question. You're a coach. At some point, you have to put down the football and get off the field and empower other people to play the game. At some point, think about that. At some point, so I coached golf for 10 years. I was a decent golfer. I wasn't a great golfer. I was a much better golf coach than I was ever a golfer. And what I did during my 10 years of coaching golf that no other coach I ever know did is I didn't take my clubs to golf practice. I didn't golf with my boys. Because if I step up to the tee and I want to show you how to hit an 8-iron 140 yards every time in the same direction, I'm going to teach you 2 things about the golf swing. I'm going to teach you stance, grip, and then swing path and hands. There's only 2 parts to a golf swing: swing path and hands. And so I would take a kid's club and face me. Okay. Mirror what I'm doing here. Where are my feet? Okay, where are your feet? Okay, how are my knees bent? Is my butt in or out? It's out. Where's my back? Spine straight. How are my shoulders? Squared up. Okay. Mimic me. Make your posture look just like my posture. Okay, let's look at your grip. How are my hands? How are your hands? Where are the V's on your thumbs pointing? To your shoulders. Okay, where are yours pointing? To my shoes. Okay, we should fix that. Okay, now I want you to take the club back. Follow me as I take it back. Same speed, same tempo. There, stop right there. Okay. All right. I want you to go back to your position. All right, do that again. I want you to come back through and stop at the ball. Okay, what are your hips doing? What are your feet doing? Where are your hands? Where should they be? They should be like yours. They should be turned over by now. So open them up, turn them over. Okay. Hit the ball. They say, you hit it. I'm not a golfer on this team. Because all I'm going to do is I hit the ball perfect every time is make you embarrassed when you step up to hit the ball and shank it to the right. So at some point, I got to step out of the shot and let you hit the ball. And I'll walk up back behind you and go, show me your grip. Okay. Now, here's what most people would do. Give me your club. Watch this. Do it like this. Do that. Just do that. Well, I can't do that. Why? Because you got my club. We got to give people the clubs. Most pastors got everyone else's club in the bag. Give them back their clubs. God already gave them the gifts. Let's give them the opportunity. The only way that you get better is by hitting the ball, not by watching me hit the ball, not by hearing me preach, not by hearing me teach, watching me do it, watching me plan it, watching me schedule it, watching me paint it. It's not my job. My job is to carry a clipboard and call a holy huddle once in a while. That's what I do. Yeah.
So question right on those lines that I already wanted to ask you. What would you say to a pastor that says, these are the areas we're going to focus in on our church, And if somebody comes and they have a vision that they want to, minister to this group or whatever, hey, that's fine, go do it, but we're not gonna announce it because we're about these things. What would you say to that, Pastor? What are your thoughts?
I'm perfectly fine with that. Here's why. Our church has 4 core values: Christ, community, connection, and cause. From that, we have one simple mission statement. We point people to a new life in Christ. From that mission statement, we have 6 priorities, and then from those priorities, we have goals. We have priorities and goals in order to accomplish the mission, and the mission based upon the core values. And it will never. And if we do every program that someone's got an idea for, we'll never accomplish this mission. But I don't need you to do a new program in our church. I don't even need to announce it. I don't care if we announce it, don't announce it. Well, should we announce it? Why not? Why wouldn't we announce what Brian's doing? Hey, Brian's got this great idea to help people who are feeling lonely. Like, he's feeling lonely, so he's starting this little group, and they're getting together on Wednesday mornings and the whole deal. And we should tell people about that. It's not a program in our church. It's a program of our church because Brian's the church. So 80% of the people in my church don't have a ministry in our building, right? Because there's nothing for them to do. There's only so much time in it. But they have a ministry of their own. So they function not in the church, but as the church. I want everyone in the church to have a ministry of their own. And we should announce them all. But it might not be something that we are doing administratively or putting a line item to from a budget. Doesn't mean we're not supportive. Did it answer what you were trying to ask me, Jordan? I mean, that's how I would answer the question of what my responsibilities are. But when I say that's my responsibility, I love that your counselor's question, because then I have to ask the question, so why are you doing all this other stuff? If you're burned out, then quit doing the things you're not responsible for. Create a leadership vacuum and let someone fill it. And someone comes up, like my wife says, if they complain about it, then here you go, here's the keys. You do it. If you're so passionate about it, you do it. But I'm not doing it anymore. And then it's usually out of fear we respond to that, like, oh man, what are they going to say if I don't do it? Well, let's find out.
Along those lines, I've talked to many pastors who say, I'm not sure if what I have is a shepherd's heart or if I'm just a real people pleaser, because I hate people to get mad at me.
There's a fine line.
I know. I don't like people to say you're not a loving pastor. I don't like people to say I think you're lazy. I don't know what you do besides Sundays, that kind of thing. Talk about how to deal with that, because the equipping approach can flow very much from a pastor's heart, but it doesn't look like meeting expectations that the pastor should do all these things and be involved. And I think that's the pressure. So many pastors I talk to, it's like, I don't want people to be mad at me. I don't want them to think I'm lazy.
So there's Jeff's talking about 2 major issues. One is unrealistic expectations, and the other is insecurity. This will be the most indicting thing I say all day long. The most insecure people I know are pastors. And so the greatest place for them to be is a pastor. Why? You get a spotlight, a microphone, a pulpit, and a title. It's a great sense of false identity to remove your insecurity. And so let me just say, and I'll say it to the faculty this afternoon, weed some of those people out. We don't need more insecure ministry leaders leading churches. So I said to youth pastors, like, if you've got an adult who's needy and likes to be around kids, never use them. If they're getting their emotional needs met because of the role, never use them. Same thing should be true of pastors like me. If I get my emotional needs met as a pastor, I should not be a pastor. I'm probably not ready for that. There's an education piece that has to take place. See, we do have a systemic problem in the church where there is an expectation of what the pastor does, what they should do, what my last pastor did. So in this particular situation, because we are the shepherds of the church, We are the leaders of the church. We have a responsibility. This is going to be the hard part. This is where we're going to have fallout in the church in the next few years. We have the responsibility to re-educate people about what pastoral ministry really is. And the way that I find questions help with that, even the so what idea, and giving people ownership and bringing it into the conception process, is because they're less likely to be critical of you when you have involved them in the process. Because now when someone's critical, who are they critical of? Them. Well, I'm not as critical of Tim. And a matter of fact, I can begin to really empathize with Tim. Like, man, you take a lot of grief for what you do as a pastor. I know now because I'm running Sunday school and 7th grade girls, right? Which my wife says the definition of hell is a 7th grade girl because she's taught 7th grade for 37 years, right? But when somebody else has ownership of something and they feel like it's theirs and they feel a bit of pushback or critique on it, they really have an understanding of what you're going through. So you want to get people off your back? Get them on your team. Get them on the team. How do you get them on the team? Give them a club. Give them their club back. Give them a responsibility, but don't assign it to them. Bring it out of them. No one also wants to be delegated and assigned. So the question, so what breaks your heart, or any kind of question like that that evokes empathy and feeling, is a way to get people involved in something. And so now, one of the things that, there's multiple parts to this, but sometimes I'm too busy to complain now because I've got things to do. I find a lot of people who complain about what I do or have expectations have way too much time on their hands. So Cindy says they need to get in the laundry room. That's where they need to go. She said, I can tell people who don't do their own laundry, men who don't do their laundry especially, because get back in the laundry room. Because then you understand what I'm going through. And so we need to get people engaged. But we don't engage them by inviting them to do something or come to what I plan. We start at an empty table and bring them to the table before the baby's born. And I think that accomplishes both of it. But then the ego part of it, the insecurity part of it, that's really hard. And I don't know how to teach that out of people. Until you get greater joy of seeing, go back to my golf illustration. My son Parker is 5'6.5", maybe. Comes up to Jeff right here when they're together, right? Parker's 30 on Friday. And he weighs 150 pounds wet. And he hits the golf ball 300 yards in the air or 330 easy. Usually gets the 350-yard drive out of almost everything he does. I can't golf with him anymore. I mean, I golf with him all the time when I see him, right? But I can't golf with him stroke for stroke. I couldn't since the time he was about 16. By the time he hit 16, he started beating Dad. And so I was able to maintain a pretty decent handicap. And so all of a sudden Parker is like, I'm like, how did you do that? You started the ball over there. How do you do that? He goes, I don't know, you're the golf coach. I said, well, I didn't teach you how to do that. He said, I know that, I'm just better than you now. And you know what? Dr. Jack Perrin, North Central Bible College, 1989, said, your job is to make sure that your students have a deeper faith in Jesus than you do. When your kids outgrow you in your walk with Christ, you have become a good youth pastor. Until then, you haven't done your job. And I think the same thing is true. And so when my son can out-golf me, I've been a great coach. I've been a good dad. When my people can out-preach me, when they can out-teach me, when they can outwork me, they can out-serve me, and they want to, I fulfilled Ephesians 4:12. Until then, I've just filled a spot on the bus. So, and I think the way to get rid of the insecurity issue is when we actually see it happening. But I don't know. I think that's a bigger question that I'm smart enough to answer. Tim?
I was going to ask, in addition to the one-on-one conversations where you invite people into conception with you, what are other spaces or ways that you invite people? Because that's great and personal, but sometimes not quite as efficient.
No, it's not efficient at all. So in our church, 4 times a year, we have what we call the Dream Team. They're not the Dream Team because they're going to win the Olympics. Most of them, can't spell Olympics in my town. And great people, great hearts. I live in the poorest, impoverished county in the state of Michigan. Education's a problem. So I'm not being disrespectful. We live in a very poor rural county. Average median age or household income is $32,000 a year. A lot of people in my church have never been told they could be anything or dream anything. So 4 times a year on our church screen, it says these words, 21-day challenge. Every day for 21 days, pray this prayer. God, break my heart, what breaks your heart for our community and one person who doesn't know Jesus. I ask everyone in the church to pray that. Hey, I'd like you to pray this for the next 21 days. I quote Daniel chapter 10, 21 days. Sometimes it takes for a breakthrough, right? And so we all send them home with a note card. God, break my heart, what breaks your heart in our congregation or community and one person who doesn't know Jesus. And then I'll say, listen, if you'll commit to praying that prayer for 21 days, on the first Saturday of the month, I would like you to join our dream team. I'd like to come and talk about what God has put on your heart. But if you haven't prayed that prayer for 21 days, don't show up at the meeting. Because I don't need to hear from you. I need to hear what God has told you. I've set the boundaries. I don't want to hear your wild ideas. What did God say? So here, it happens every time. 4 times a year, it happens every time. Someone shows up and goes, I got an idea. Okay. We'll get to that in about a month. Right now, I want to know what God said to you when you asked him to break your heart. So take a piece of paper. Everyone's got one that says, so what breaks your heart? Start writing. And then start comparing notes. Then I take them through a process, and they put them on sticky notes, and they put them all on the wall. And this happens every time. I'm not exaggerating. I'll give you an illustration. Sometimes I do this through a walk. I call it the So What Walk. And I take people through our community or school campus or whatever, and I say, listen, I want you to walk for a half hour in silence, and as you walk, just ask God to break your heart with what breaks his for our community. When you come back, I want you to sit down, grab a note card and a sticky note. I want you to write down what you saw, what you heard, what you smelled, what you observed, and I want you to put it on the wall. And then when it's all on the wall, so 20 people, 15 people, whatever, put it on the wall, I say, okay, can somebody organize that? Now, here's what most pastors would do. Just a minute, I'm going to organize this. Here's the rule. Never do anything for people in the church they can learn to do themselves. You should write that down or tattoo that on your forehead. Never do anything in the church for people who can learn to do it themselves. Okay? So they categorize all those things and say, so what is all that? So what are we going to do about that? So which one of those did you write down? And you find that they break down into 3 or 4 categories. Okay, so if you wrote down this thing over here about finance and poverty and this and that, then you guys should meet over there. Start forming a committee, start forming a team, follow that checklist that's on there, follow that plan, and you can start your own ministry for that. If you wrote those over here about children and education, boom. And so now they know where they fit, and they've got a tribe, and people share the same affinity. Why? Because they prayed the same prayer. So I love doing this with teenagers. We were going to do a So What walk one night. It was pouring rain. And so I got invited by the youth pastor to come in to take the kids through a So What walk. And I said, well, I'm not doing a So What walk tonight because it's raining, so we're going to do a virtual So What walk. So I want you to take about 10 minutes. I want you to be silent before the Lord. Some of you are just going to be like the longest 10 minutes of your life and ask God to break your heart with what breaks his for something in our community and ask him to give you one word. He's going to make it simple on you tonight. One word. And I'll tell you when, and after 10 minutes, you can take those note cards and you can write your one word and put it in the basket, and we'll see what the Lord said. Kids are like, oh, right? The adults do the same thing. Oh. And so I went over after they did it all, and I grabbed the basket, and I pulled out a card, and it said, shoes. Cool. Shoes. Shoes. I'm looking around the room. Feet. Socks. You guys been talking before we got here? No? And so out of the 20 or so kids who were there, 15 cards or so said something to do with feet, shoes, or socks. I said, I don't know what that means. I said, I think we should pray for another week and ask God to reveal what He's told you tonight. I said, and maybe He won't reveal it in a week. Maybe it'll be 2 weeks. Maybe it'll be, I don't know, but God's up to something. Tuesday comes. I get a phone call from the regional vice president of Wolverine Worldwide Shoe Company, who makes Merrill, Bass, Chow, name it. Well, I mean, largest shoe company, one of the largest shoe companies in the world. I grew up in that town. It's 45 minutes from my church. He said, hey, heard you have a community center? I said, we do. Could you use some shoes? I said, always. He goes, how about 2,000 pair? I said, what? I'd like to give you 2,000 new pair of shoes and boots for your county because we've heard that we can trust you to distribute them. You can't sell them or anything. I said, okay. I said, that's fascinating. He said, what's fascinating? He said, it's a long story. I said, I'll tell you if you want to hear it. Are you a believer in Jesus? Right? He said, and get ready to hang up the phone. Hey, oh, by the way, forgot to tell you, we also got 1,000 pair of socks. So the next Sunday, I get to go back and meet with the youth group and reveal to them why God told them shoes. You think any kid missed the shoe giveaway? Did I have to invite them back in? They asked God to break their heart. I asked them what broke their heart. They told me what broke their heart. I empowered them to do something what broke their heart, and they brought friends. And people came to Jesus, and people were fed, and there was leftovers, just like Philip saying, we should feed the crowd. There's other ways to do it besides one-on-one. And sometimes group is much better for cohesion. I could tell you more stories like that one.
You mentioned a checklist, too?
Yeah.
Do you have something?
Oh, yeah, I always give people, there's a process you need to follow of questions. I'll send you, do my form? Okay. I'm going to send you guys what's called So What. I'll send you So What, and I'll send you 10 steps of stillness so you fill out the form. And just follow it. It'll just walk you through everything from how you're going to create a budget. So when are you going to meet? So when's the first meeting date you're going to do? So who's going to be responsible? So who do you have on your team? So who's not on your team? So what kind of gaps are you having? And by the way, every sentence begins with the word so. It's a math equation. It's a logic process, and so it's actually neurological. It evokes the logical response for anybody of any age could get to the conclusion. That's why Jesus taught with questions. That's why we should ask more questions in our sermons, but that's a whole nother seminar. You should leave people without answers on Sunday mornings, by the way. That might fly in the face of everything that is taught here. I don't know. But I would rather people walk out and start the sermon as opposed to walk out hearing the end of the sermon. I think Jesus opened up the scroll and started the sermon and kept and left the conversation hanging so it could go home with the people to finish it. And so we ask the question, then we answer the question in 22 minutes, and then we send you home, and there's no reason for you to think anymore. So, because church is inadvertently, I know I use that word a lot, become about amusing people. It's entertainment. And the word amuse means to not think. Muse means to think. Amuse means to not think. And so, we're amusing people to death in the church. And they don't have to think anymore because we're doing it all for them. So Same thing with why we ask so what questions. Other questions, other comments, other disagreements. We can thumb wrestle if you want.
Thinking about Jordan Hayes, after his question, and, about running out. I remember I came through here to Grace 30 years ago, when Ken Beckel was over the pastoral ministries department. I had pastored and been on staff for about 10 years before that. I had a Bible college degree back from Dallas. And there was an assignment in that class, in one of those pastoral ministry classes, that really changed my outlook. And I grew up at a church planter's home as a kid, no U-Haul, regiment and all. But Ken had us formulate a personal philosophy of ministry from Paul's address to the Ephesian elders and Maurice, which he begins talking about the things you see in me, and then he gets to that, look to yourselves first, and then shepherd the flock, and the flock, in that order. And then there's a whole host of things there that you could just really formulate very nice. One of the things that he had us really think through was our understanding of success in ministry, what that would look like. And one of the things that he encouraged us to formulate our thoughts and our ideas of success based only on the things that you can control. That was kind of, for me, that was, the lights came on, and it was really a kind of a course correction, major course correction. Because I'd been through the 80s with all the church growth stuff, and, had a steady diet of that kind of thing. And Kim, as a mentor, some of the things that he gave us in class that were assignments were so practical. And I think, some of those kind of things have really kind of sustained me this, 40 years of pastoral ministry, to really think about how you define success, about looking to yourself first and then shepherding the flock, and how that plays out in some of the things you said were very much Ken's practices in pastoral ministry too, about urgency and emergency.
And I like the idea of measuring what you can control, because there's a lot of things that we give a lot of effort and energy to they're out of our control. But boy, they take a lot of our attention and a lot of our time. In our church this year, we've been looking in the last month of different ways, of different metrics, because we don't have a lot of great metrics in the church of how to measure success. It's butts and seats, dollars in the plate, right? That's the American way. And so I presented to our team a couple months ago, and I was embarrassed that I hadn't done this before, and I'm really reevaluating some of my own things in ministry. Is that the only thing I can measure is how many people I'm discipling. That's all I can measure. And so I'm doing that with all of my leaders right now. Listen, your job evaluation next year, your entire assessment and your evaluation is how many people you want one-on-one discipled.
Yeah, Kim walked into that. Those I remember the kind of father you are, kind of like you are.
Yeah.
How you take care of yourself physically,
Yeah.
your spiritual growth. These are things that are within our
Control.
ability to control.
Yeah.
And to the extent that we are
Yeah.
doing well in those areas, not the size of the church, the fluctuations up and down.
You can't control that.
You can't control a lot of this kind of thing.
What I love about that, Lane, is because that's what I said 5 years ago. I can't control what's going on in here. I can't control what's going on. There's nothing I can do about any of this, right? But what can I control? My diet, my movement, my sleep, my words, my expectations. There's a lot of things that God has given me 100% control of. And sometimes I think we abdicate our responsibility by just saying, well, it's up to the Lord. No, it's up to you. You got control over it. He gave you control and dominion over it, and that means most part of our lives to take control. So I love that. I'll go back to something I said, and then it's noon. Jesus trained his replacements. That's what he did. In 3.5 years, he trained his replacements. And I think if we're always trying to work ourselves out of a job, we'll always have a job, because you become indispensable. The coach that can take you to the championship is the coach you never want to get rid of. But can you imagine a championship coach? Can you imagine Jim Harbaugh stepping out of the field? Had to get it in one time. Can you imagine any coach, Brian Day, stepping onto the field in 2024, winning the national championship, and taking the ball and running it? No. Kicking the winning field goal? No. Making a tackle? No. Why? Brian Day's a coach. And you're a pastor. Get off the field. Just get off the field. The only thing people in the church can't do are the things that I'm too lazy to train them to do or too proud to let go of. And that's within my control. So thanks for 3 hours of your time this morning, 2 hours of your time, or whatever it's been. I hope it hasn't been a waste for you. So thanks.
So you're a Michigan fan, and he's an Ohio State fan.
We're still friends.
And that's God, something God can do. And he puts two.
Got another one here. We have at least three in the room. Two of us are alum, just saying.